They were
drowns
live.
out his final noises. It's no surprise that what this young man ran into wasn't a dream at all, but an interaction with
Hey,
an
go let me
anomaly
know if
that
it's
has since
working,
been classified as
because my homeboy said that it was
SCP-4595, but
Go
also
to
has
YouTube,
the
type my
quite
name in.
simple and
He said it
appropriate
was
name
blinking the
of
whole entire time.
Witch. SCP-4595 is the designation given to a small
Go to
room
YouTube and
located
write
inside
and
of a
type it
woodshed
what?
that is
Hold
itself
on,
found behind a home near the town of Jasper, Indiana. The house appears to have been abandoned for some
Type in your
time,
name,
and there are
and
no
type it
reliable
what?
records of who the homes behind a home.
What's your name, kid? I forgot.
Okay.
The house appears to have been abandoned for
Type
some
in your
time,
name.
and there are no reliable records of who the homes
Hello, sir.
What's your name, kid? I forgot.
Okay.
Type in
your name.
There are no reliable records of who the homes.
Hello, sir.
What's your name, kid? I forgot. Name?
Alright, what happened?
What's your name, kid? I forgot.
You said what? What you say? What? What happened? You said what? What you say? Really? What? Y'all can't talk about Lucas, Lucas. I couldn't do that. What? Oh yeah. This is Tavon Lucas. You see my face. Mama ain't not pretty. Alright, goose. Yo, what the hell? See? Hey, yo.
And they quickly place him into the back of the ambulance. The girl begins to pull herself into the back as well, but is quite
say un?
forcefully
You
shoved
say
back
un?
into the street. Patients only is the
if you
sole
did, it would've
response
been a
from the
problem.
paramedic who pushed her before he slams the door shut. The girl gets a brief look at her friend's frightened face through the back window as the ambulance speeds away. Several days later,
I realized what happened.
his most recent or original owners were. The only item inside the woodshed is a simple, rough-hewn
you gotta be
wooden
a certain
bench,
age, yeah.
though at the time of the anomaly's discovery,
Yeah,
two other
don't tell
objects
nobody.
were found as well. The first was a small
Wait,
shovel, the type that might be used for gardening. The shovel appears to be ordinary in every way, except for the very tip, which has what
That is
looks to be
true.
a blood stain
Gonna
on
do
it,
it anyway.
though tests have been unable to retrieve any
Oh,
genetic
no, it's-
material from the discoloration.
It's recording the other
The
TV.
second
I gotta.
object was a small human skeleton. The body of the deceased person was removed from the woodshed, and an autopsy revealed that it had belonged to an adolescent
what?
male, roughly 11 to 13 years old. While the exact cause of death was unable to be determined,
recording the wrong
it is
TV,
extremely
that's the
likely
problem.
that it was due to the anomalous effects that SCP-4595
I know,
produces,
was that Chris?
but more on those in a moment.
Yeah.
Further examination of the woodshed reveals that the word witch has been scrawled on the door with charcoal, though it is unknown who wrote the message and whether it is meant to serve as a warning or has some other purpose.
Wait.
It is highly likely, though.
Yo, can I get
the word is
ADC?
referring to the final element of SCP-4595, the body that is buried beneath the woodshed's dirt floor. Ground-penetrating imaging tools were brought in to investigate the shed, and researchers discovered that underneath one portion of the floor that appears to have been scorched at some point, a body is buried roughly 1 meter beneath the surface, which has since been designated as SCP-4595-A. Scans have revealed the body to be a humanoid figure, vaguely feminine in appearance. Its limbs are twisted in a painful and unnatural manner, and there are several large wounds present on its face, chest, and neck. But perhaps strangest of all is that despite
look at the
evidence at the
casting.
site
That
pointing to
casting.
the location not having been disturbed for many years,
Oh,
the corpse
shit.
buried beneath does not
does.
seem to show any signs at all of
Who am I
decomposition,
again? I'm top.
still appearing as
Lord.
it most
I
likely
did bad
did at
in
the
the
time it
mirror.
was
Oh,
interred
Lord,
in the
bad.
ground. You are most likely asking yourself why the SCP Foundation has relied solely on subterranean imaging in order to assess the state of SCP-4595-A,
Shut the
and
fuck
why
up,
they
yo.
don't simply dig up the anomalous corpse.
But shouldn't it be
The
a her?
reason why they haven't
Alright.
is due to the
It
anomalous
should.
effects present at the site.
The casting should be a
Testing
girl. I
on
don't care what they say.
SCP-4595 has concluded that anyone who enters the shed
You're right.
and remains there for any substantial amount of time
Because he's
begin to
hot.
experience a
I don't
number
know,
of
bro.
effects.
It's just, huh?
First, they will start to
Yeah.
feel paranoid,
Whoa.
getting the impression that someone is watching them.
See, now y'all both
This
confused.
purely mental effect is quickly
Oh.
followed by a physical one, where the individual's
Anytime.
skin will start to itch.
Shoot.
Those who linger in SCP-4595 long
We
enough
ain't got no AP in
will
this bitch.
eventually
What y'all
begin to
doing?
violently scratch at themselves
Who
in
you?
an attempt to relieve the itchiness. These effects, while very uncomfortable, will eventually subside if they leave the location, and it is very likely
But no,
that
I
they are
just
meant
wanted
to
to play at
serve as a
least.
warning
And I just
of what
didn't
will
trust
happen
you.
if one partakes in
What
the
you want
most
me to say?
dangerous aspect of
Should I go TP?
SCP-4595, which is disturbing the body buried beneath it. Anyone who attempts to impact
Fuck is this shit,
SCP-4595-A
Bruce?
by attempting to dig it up
If
or
I click this
otherwise
link.
remove it from the location will quickly experience
What the hell?
this anomalous effect.
How about you just go to
The
my
individual
live?
will soon
Why you
find
click? Why you bring me?
experiencing a shortness of breath, and soon will begin coughing and choking.
Yo,
unable to
my
breathe at all.
homeboy name is
This is
Dustin,
due to a
and he can't.
phenomenon in
I
which
say
any
he's the one who's in a
space
wheelchair.
the
He can't play no
chest
more.
cavity,
So I just
lungs,
all the
airways,
videos I make is
stomach,
just for
and
him.
intestines will
There we
completely
go, so-
fill with Schistocerca gregaria.
Okay,
better
so
known
that was my
as the
roommate.
desert locust.
Let's not
The
talk about
insects
it.
will continue
Let's
to
just-
appear within the individual's
honestly,
body until they expire.
guys are-
a process that typically takes
You
mere
guys,
minutes.
you guys are
Any
worried about the
locusts
wrong
that manage to
things.
escape the
You're
individual's
worried about the
body,
wrong.
most often
You're
through
worried
the
about
mouth
the
and
wrong
nose,
thing.
will disappear into a vapor that quickly dissipates the moment they cross the threshold.
You're
of the
worried
woodshed's doorway.
about the wrong.
So
I'm going.
far,
All right,
no
one more
method
thing.
has been determined that can prevent any of SCP-4595's effects.
That's too much
And
work.
for the time being,
That's spelled
no
something wrong?
personnel are allowed
That's
to
spelled
enter the
something wrong.
anomalous shed except for testing purposes. But even in those cases, the disturbance of SCP-4595-A is not allowed. Due to the relative ease with which the Foundation can secure the site and is able to prevent anyone from entering, it has been classified as safe, with the additional disruption class of
You know
dark
why we not
and the risk
friends, yo?
class of warning.
You know why we
What
not
is
friends?
SCP-4595?
You just be saying
Is the
shit.
SCP-4595
Saying shit you don't need to say.
A body a victim, doomed to an eternity beneath this ramshackle shed?
Don't
Or
do
is it
that.
a
We don't need to
monster
hear it.
sealed away for some unknown purpose. The only warning for us to stay away.
I
being a single word
gotta
on the
mute
door.
it. This is all. Do what you want.
Maybe one day we'll finally know the answer to why SCP-4595 is only known as the Witch. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr.
This
Bob.
is it, but
like
this is it. This is pretty
SCP-3998,
good.
The
Relax,
Wicker Witch
relax in a
Lives,
minute,
for
alright?
another SCP entry
was that
that
Rocco?
tells the tale of a witch, though maybe not the story.
Damn,
that you'd
Goose!
expect.
Your last two games.
Make sure you
000.
subscribe and turn
000.
on
What are you
notifications so
doing?
you don't miss a single anomaly as we delve
Goose
further
don't-
and further into the SCP Foundation's
Goose don't wanna
classified
play.
archives. What was that? The man and
Hey,
woman's
who
hike through a
mic is
gently
that,
rolling
though?
portion of the Rocky Mountains has just
Goose,
taken
that's-
a turn for the dangerous.
You know, I hear
There's
it,
something there in the bush.
but I hear
The
it
man
through
tells
Goose
her
mic.
before stepping in front of her in a defensive pose. They watch the bush intently. There's a slight rustling of the leaves as if something is inside.
Yeah, I'm going for a tank. All right,
The
I'm
man
going
picks
tank.
up a stick from the ground and holds it in front of him, ready to
Nah, probably
strike
not.
whatever fearsome beast is lurking in the underbrush. The rustling stops, but the man doesn't move from his protective stance. Do you think it's
Yo, why does
gone?
it slow down?
The woman asks. The man isn't sure. He leans in towards the bush, searching for
Because
signs
you're not looking
of
at my
what might
screen.
be
You're not on my
hiding
live. That's the
inside.
problem.
Ah! The man screams and falls backwards as the creature emerges from the bush. Aw, the woman cries. It's a pika. She kneels down to get a closer look at the adorable little creature. Pikas are native to this part of Colorado, and they resemble rabbits, but with small, rounded ears. She watches it hop back off the trail before turning around to see her friend lying tangled in the branches of a tree. She can't help but laugh as she offers a hand to help pull him out of his predicament.
You guys sound
Are you
beautiful.
all right? She asks between fits of laughter. Yes, he's fine. The only thing hurt was his pride. He notices a small red spot on his arm and rubs it, but it doesn't seem to hurt at all. His attention is diverted by the woman, though, who is marveling at the tree he was just stuck in. Free of the branches, he can appreciate now that the tree really is incredible. It looks like a huge blue spruce, but the name is a complete misnomer, because this tree is a vibrant red color. I've never seen anything like it, she says, and the man hasn't either. Neither knows what species it is, and, strangely, there don't seem to be any others like it. Maybe this is the result of an odd genetic defect that turns blue spruces red. After admiring the tree for a moment, the pair decides that they've hiked far enough and that they should probably head back to the car. She jokes that he's likely exhausted from his run-in with a wild animal, and he laughs, but clearly his ego has been bruised.
Yo, Goose or Don Deal, one of y'all turn
The
your
man
mics down.
stops
I
his
shouldn't
car
have to
in
hear
front
the
of the
music
woman's
through
house,
y'all.
and she thanks him for taking her on the hike.
No, I
As she
muted it
starts
already.
to get out, though, he stops her.
I
He asks if she wants
I
to go
have
do
him
something
muted.
else, like dinner?
What?
The woman thanks him for his offer, but she has to be up early the next day for work. Just a quick drink then? An hour? 30 minutes? The woman tries her best to let her friend down easy, explaining that she likes him as
Sorry,
a
got
friend
it.
and as only that. The man opens
Yeah.
his mouth to respond, but she stops him.
Yeah, man,
If he
put
valued
this
their
jockey out
friendship,
the
he
chat.
wouldn't
Yo,
try
I
to
can't
take
hear y'all.
advantage of it by using it as a backdoor to dating her. The man
It's
again
not
looks like his pride
jockey,
has
it's
been shattered.
y'all, Mike.
He apologizes and admits that she is right. It's just that he has such a good time with
Alright,
her that he never wants it to end.
Happens.
She gives him a
I already
sad
had it.
smile as
It's
she closes
deafened.
the car door, and he watches her enter her house before he finally drives
Oh
away.
wait, what the
It's
fuck?
2
It was
weeks
muted.
later
It was
when
still
the
playing.
man's phone
My bad,
rings.
y'all. Hey, listen.
It's his friend.
I
She
apologize. I
explains
didn't
that
deserve
she's
all
been
that. I was
thinking a
giving to
lot
y'all.
about what he said in the car, and that she likes spending time with
Just
him
don't let
too.
it happen again.
Maybe there could be something more to their relationship. The man can't believe it. Is this really happening? The woman is serious. She'd like to take him up on that
Yeah,
dinner
we
offer,
in.
if he's still interested. Her treat. She wants to know what he is doing right. Ah! The man suddenly
Why's my
yelps in pain. Is he okay? What was that sound? Yes,
Wait, they're all
I'm
AD.
fine. It was
Okay,
nothing.
I'm
The
going
man
tank,
tells her.
motherfuckers. Where
It's
should I
just
go?
that now's not a good time. The woman doesn't understand. She thought he'd want to see her. She explains that she's leaving town for a work trip the next day and will be gone for a couple of weeks. She was hoping she could see him before she left, but
You didn't see it?
the man cries out in pain again. He tells her that he hasn't been
today.
feeling well all day, but that he'll be all right. Okay, well, get well soon. I'll call you when I get back. They exchange goodbyes, and the man hangs up the phone. The man looks terrible. His skin is pale, and his face looks hollow and gaunt. He looks down at his arm and sees that the veins themselves appear to be moving, pulsing, and vibrating. He screams again in agony and falls to the floor, clutching his arm. After writhing on the floor, he manages to summon the strength to reach for the phone. His hand searches on the table above him, and eventually he's able to knock it onto the floor. He grabs the phone and starts to dial 911. Before he can press 1 again, another wave of intense searing pain consumes him. Several weeks later, the woman is standing outside the man's house. Mail and newspapers are piled up on his front porch, as if no one has been in or out in some time. She knocks on the door, but there's no response. "Hello?" she calls out, but still nothing. She's very worried. She's tried calling him several times, but he never answered or returned her messages. She tries the doorknob, and to her surprise, the front door swings open. She steps inside, and the room is dark. She's also immediately hit by a strong aroma of pine? She searches on the wall and finds the switch. She turns on the lights and can't believe what she sees standing in front of her. There in the middle of the room is a massive spruce tree, its upper branches pressing against the ceiling. She reaches out and touches the tree's vivid red branches. They feel sticky and wet. She pulls her hand away and looks down to see that it's covered in a red substance. That's when she notices something else. Stuck among the trunk at the base of the tree is the half-consumed body of her friend. Unfortunately, this pair would never have the opportunity to see their feelings take root and grow, because unbeknownst to them, this beautiful tree is actually a very deadly anomaly, known to the SCP Foundation as SCP-867, but which is perhaps better known by its very appropriate nickname, blood spruce. SCP-867 is, or at least appears to be, quite similar to the species of tree Pisceae pungens, better known as the blue spruce. Of course, there are a number of dramatic differences between 867 and its non-anomalous counterpart. Visually, and most obvious, is the coloration. While blue spruces, as the name implies, are typically a blue-green color, SCP-867 is a deep, vibrant red. There's another major visual difference too, with the blood spruce lacking any sort of seed cones that you would normally expect to find.
I'm coming.
With no pine cones to protect and spread seeds, you'd be right to ask how SCP-867 goes about reproducing. The answer to that question is what makes this beautiful tree such a dangerous anomaly. The secret to how SCP-867 reproduces is found in its leaves. While they look like pine needles, SCP-867's leaves are, in fact, needles. Their structure is very similar to that of hypodermic needles, and each one contains a single long, thin seed, which sits above a small gas pocket at the base. When a living creature touches the leaves, the tree immediately reacts. It triggers the gas pocket in the base of the leaf to release, which injects the seed into the skin of whatever touched it. The process is quite similar to that found in auto-injectors, like those used to quickly treat allergic reactions. The seed itself is extremely small and is coated in a liquid that has both anesthetic and coagulant properties, which makes the process virtually undetectable.
Nice.
Once implanted in the skin, these seeds can lay dormant for up to 2 weeks before they begin the germination process, and the true horror of SCP-867 is revealed. Once the seeds begin to sprout and grow, they will not seek to penetrate through the skin like a plant rising out of the soil. Instead, the strange plant will grow within its host's body, spreading throughout the circulatory system. This process is extremely painful for the host. The plant's tendrils wind through their veins and capillary system, stretching and pressing against them as the blood spruce grows within them.
Okay.
Eventually, the ever-increasing size of the plant's tendrils becomes too much, and the veins will begin to rupture. This leads to severe internal bleeding, and soon after, the death of the host. The entire process is quite quick, with it only taking 24 hours from when the seeds first sprout to the host dying. But that single day will feel like an eternity to the afflicted individual as they feel the plant rapidly growing inside of their body. But even though the host has expired, this parasitoid tree is far from finished with them, or at least their body. Soon after death, a new instance of the blood spruce will burst from the body. The red tree is quite small at first, but it will continue to quickly grow, just as it did within its host's body, and can reach maturity in just 30 days. And unlike most other
where y'all
plants,
at?
SCP-867 is able to grow regardless of light or soil
bitch
conditions,
mad.
because it does
Run,
not
bitch.
produce food via photosynthesis. No, this plant is carnivorous. As it
Yo,
grows,
look
the
at this shit.
867 will slowly consume
at this
its
shit.
host's body
Look at him up,
until nothing
2v1.
remains except the
Motherfucker.
blood red tree.
Minions OP.
Instances of SCP-867 were first identified in Colorado during the 1990s, following reports of numerous disappearances of hikers and park rangers. The SCP Foundation dispatched a team to the area to investigate, and they soon discovered numerous instances of the previously unidentified tree. Several still young specimens were acquired, though unfortunately, this led to the deaths of several agents who were not yet aware of just how dangerous the red spruces could be. Once their threat level was properly assessed, several specimens were flagged for containment and research purposes, while all of the other identified instances still in the wild were destroyed. The remaining instances of SCP-867 were classified as Euclid and are now securely kept at a Foundation biocontainment site. Direct human contact with the plants is normally not allowed, and remote rovers are used for the majority of tests and upkeep. If for any reason it is necessary for a human to enter 867's containment cell, they are to wear full hazmat suits with a Kevlar underlayer, and upon exiting the cell, must undergo a full herbicidal treatment and inspection. Should any possible puncture marks be discovered, they will be forced to quarantine for no less than 15 days. Ah, nature. It's so beautiful, peaceful, and calming, yet seems determined to try and kill us in any number of ways.
No.
If you're out hiking or camping in the woods,
No.
try to remember this extremely famous adage, which I may or may not have just made up. It goes, leaves of 3, let them be. Needles of red, well, you're probably already dead. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-021, the skin worm, for another deadly anomaly with parasitic tendencies. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single anomaly as we delve further and further into the SCP Foundation's classified archives. 3 SCP Foundation agents stand before a large
back.
warehouse. Their mission is simple. Enter the building, find the observation unit that has gone missing inside, recover the data
You're
from
gonna
it,
back after
and
this though.
leave. It should be easy, but the rundown structure they're standing in front of
Yes,
is
sir.
no ordinary building. This is SCP-015. The leader of the group, a large, muscled man who goes by the codename of Agent 6, slides open a large door on the front of the warehouse, and immediately the whole group is struck by a sight that makes them reconsider just how easy this mission is going to be. In front of them is not a wide-open warehouse floor, but a cramped tunnel leading deeper into the building. The group has a job to do, though, and so the 3 head inside. Agent 2 first, followed by Agent Lon, the data specialist,
Who's about to be up,
and
yo?
finally, Agent 6, the expedition leader in the rear. As they enter the narrow hall
I
of
don't like
pipes,
you. Here you go.
light from their flashlights plays off the floor, walls, and
Let
ceiling.
me ward it. Just let me ward it
Flashlights are
first.
one of the only items allowed in SCP-015, and they reveal what the researchers had told them in their briefing, that many of the pipes aren't made of standard
What you mean you
materials,
pulling up? You don't
but
need this
instead
mine. Go somewhere.
are all sorts of strange substances like wood, glass, or even bone.
Don't take my buff.
The odd series of
Don't take
pipes
my
have
bluff.
formed a
My
twisting
buff.
tunnel
It's
leading
mine.
deeper into the warehouse. The group must be careful, since the floor is uneven, with pipes occasionally sticking up out of the floor like tree roots, ready to trip the unobservant. The 3 follow the corridors of pipes along the path that they each had to memorize. As they come to branching paths, Agent 2 speaks the series of
You remember
turns
when
they
Goose
must
was
take
like,
aloud. Left,
I was talking to you.
left,
He was like, I was
right,
talking to you the whole entire
left,
time.
right,
I was like, nah,
right
Goose,
again,
this was what's happening.
straight,
You weren't here.
left. and so on as they go deeper and deeper. They'd have to follow the directions exactly if they hope to reach the place where the modular robotic vehicle should be. Left, straight, straight again, right. Just a couple more turns and they'd reach the point where the MRV had sent its last signal before going offline. As they walk, though, they find that some of the passageways are getting more difficult to pass. The pipes have closed in at certain points, choking the already small tunnels down to mere crawlways. At one particularly narrow point, the group must get down on their bellies and pull themselves along the ground. After Lon and 2 exit the tight passage, Agent 6 suddenly calls out to the 2 agents ahead of him. "What is it? What's wrong?" 2 asks. "I'm stuck," comes the response from 6. Lon and 2 grab 6's arms and begin pulling. With a loud grunt from all of them, 6 finally comes free. His pant leg is shredded from the thorny wood that one of the pipes in the narrow tunnel is made from, but he's free, and they can continue on. Finally, after what seemed like an hour of walking, they finally find it. The modular robotic vehicle that had been sent in to investigate the current state of SCP-015. There's something very strange about the robot's condition, though. It looks like it has been speared right through its primary observation unit. A smooth black pipe that appeared to be made of dark fabric had pierced the vehicle right through its camera, but the lens didn't appear broken. Instead, it looked as if the pipe had somehow connected with it, docking inside the lens housing as if the 2 parts were made for each other. Other pipes had protruded from the floors and walls as well, snaking into open spots in the vehicle and lifting it up a foot off the ground. They looked over the robot, which was held helpless in the air, its wheels slowly spinning as its internal battery ran down. The agents walked around the MRV, examining it, looking confused about the fate that had befallen it. 6 suddenly broke the silence. "Well, what are you waiting for?" Lon wasn't sure what to do, though. As she got closer to the robot, she noticed that a foul-smelling substance was dripping from the pipe that had merged with the camera. Her job was to remove the data from the MRV, but they also had strict orders not to damage anything in SCP-015. So what was she to do about the robot? Wasn't it technically a part of SCP-015 now? She was worried that if she removed the data cards, SCP-015 might... Well, she didn't know exactly. 6 didn't buy it, though. The researchers may have told them that 015 reacts.
Who you want? Who you want?
He could see now that it's just a bunch of weird pipes. Maybe it grows or moves a bit, but how did he know they were there? It hadn't shown any signs of sentience, let alone sapience. He wasn't going to hang around in here any longer than he had to, though. And if Lon wouldn't get on with it,
fuck it.
He would.
Someone else was dead.
6 moves to the MRV and flips open the data cover on its side.
Oh, there you go.
More of the fetid liquid
you can't eat that
pours
wall
out,
either.
but he
That
ignores
sucks.
it. Lon and 2 both look at each other.
He said it already, but then he dipped. Look at him. He don't want to go in first. He don't want to die.
From somewhere deep inside SCP-015. 6 doesn't seem to have heard it, and begins to remove the thin data cards from the MRV.
Yeah.
With the data now recovered, he decides to see if he could free the vehicle from the pipes. It wasn't necessarily a mission objective, but why let good Foundation property go to waste when it's right here in front of them? 6 pulls first at the MRV, then the pipes that were running into it, but he can't get it to move. It's completely stuck,
He said this guy
seemingly
was not
fused to the
diamond.
pipes.
Uh-oh.
Come on, we've got the data, let's get out of here.
He pretty much called you
She says.
a
But 6
bitch
isn't
and a
done
half.
trying. He sets his flashlight down and uses both hands, pushing against the wall of pipes with his foot to gain additional leverage, when suddenly, there's a creaking
You caught
sound.
me, I ain't gonna lie. Yeah, you got me.
Ha! I think I got it. But 6 was mistaken. It wasn't the sound of the MRV coming free that he had heard, but the sound of the floor underneath him giving way. 6 falls into the floor up to his armpits, and the other 2 agents rush to help
It could be
him.
the patch, because my
As they
game been
do,
freezing,
they notice
yo.
the glow and
Since
immediate
it-
burst
since
of
it's
heat
patched.
coming from the hole. Thickly flowing molten glass begins to fill the hole, and Agent 6 cries for help as they desperately try to pull him free. His cries turn into screams of desperation as they each grab an arm and, after a struggle, finally manage to free him and drag him from the hole. 6 is no longer screaming as he is pulled free, though. His eyes and mouth are locked wide in sheer panic. Lon is now the one who starts to scream, as she realizes that they have pulled only the top half of Agent 6 from the hole above the fiery pit. The bottom half of his body is completely gone, burned away by the heat of the liquid glass. There's no time to be shocked, though, because pipes
Don't
begin to
trust
hiss
them.
and
Don't
ping
trust
all
them.
around them. A wooden pipe above 2 and Lon suddenly bursts, sending a cloud of dust flying into their faces. It's powdered glass, and it starts to pour out of the broken pipe, covering what's left of 6 completely. 2 spits out a thick stream of blood, his mouth shredded from the glass particles, as Lon desperately tries not to rub them deeper into the cuts in her eyes. They both know they can't stay here, though. They have to run. The pipes are deafening as they move as quickly as they can back the way they came. It sounds like a train is barreling through the building. They're surrounded by chaos. Boiling chemicals pour out of one pipe. Tiny slicing rose thorns spray out of another. They come to a crawlway that's just a couple feet wide, but it's their only way forward, and they have no choice.
I got him.
but to enter.
I got his bitch.
Two dives
This
in
bitch
and starts
stupid.
crawling.
Where's that at?
Lon is hesitant, but a blast of steam from a pipe near her head convinces her she has no choice, and she follows after him.
Dummy.
Two wriggles through the narrow passage and is surrounded by more sounds of pipes creaking all around him. Each one seems like it might burst and pour
we
who
got
knows
this,
what
son.
deadly
We got
substance onto
this.
him. But he has to suppress his fear and keep moving forward. Finally, he emerges into a
Same.
wider hallway. He turns and looks back at the hole. Lon should have been right behind him, but there's no sign of her. He sticks his head back in and calls for her. There's no response, but he can hear her still in there, somewhere in the dark, struggling. He has to help her. Two gets back into the passage and starts
Randos?
crawling. She couldn't have been that
Or
far
your
behind
friend?
him, probably just around the next turn. But as he crawls around the bend, there's nothing there, just another wall of pipes. The passage has been sealed up. It's a dead end. He presses
Oh,
his
you
ear
should-
to the
sorry.
wall and can hear Lon screaming on the other
Yo,
side.
just go Leandry first item.
He hits his
Let's go. Let's
flashlight
go
against the
Leandry's. There
pipes
you
in
go.
anger. The pipe shakes for a moment, then bursts, spraying out a black liquid
Yo,
that
you gonna let
covers
him
his
pull
hand.
you like that,
It's
yo?
some kind of corrosive acid, and he screams as it burns through his gloves to the flesh beneath. He quickly crawls backwards out of the narrow tunnel and emerges back out into the wider passage. Chu cradles his hand, trying not to look at the exposed bone. "I'm sorry," he cries as he runs through the tunnel of pipes towards what he hopes is the exit. "I'll get help. I'll come back, I swear." Lon can't hear his promises, though. She heard what she thought was a pipe burst followed by Chu's cries, but she doesn't know now if he's dead or alive. She decides she has no choice but to go back the way
Yo,
she
this on
came.
the ADC? 'Cause this
Maybe
bitch
there's another
fuck
way
on
out.
me.
But after moving just a few inches, her feet touch
Dummy.
a solid wall. She's trapped in a space no bigger than a coffin. She feels around, but there's nothing here in the dark. Nothing at all. Just smooth, fuzzy, warm pipes. No, wait,
This one is
there
like
is
the shit out of
something.
me, just
A
not
gap
gonna
in the
lie.
ceiling. But it's just the open end of another pipe. And now, there's something dripping out of it. Droplets of whatever the substance is land on her
Camille's here.
face, and then a full stream of liquid pours out onto her. She coughs as it gets into her mouth, but then realizes that it's sweet. It's honey?
Yo, come this way,
At
come
least
this
it
way,
wasn't
come this
molten
way.
glass or deadly acid. Maybe she could even survive for a time on the liquid until
No,
another
Sona.
expedition team came
Camille's
to
here.
rescue her. Her brief moment of hope is
Oh,
cut short
that just
when she
lagged
realizes
a
that
little
the pipe
bit.
isn't stopping, and that she's already lying in an inch-deep pool of honey. Lon beats on the walls and ceiling as the honey continues to rise around her and screams for help. She tries to plug the pipe with her fingers, but it's no use. Nothing can stop more and more of it from pouring out. The honey continues to rise around her,
Wait.
and all she can do is scream and clog
No.
the pipes that have created
2
her
seconds, I
tumor.
got this.
She presses her lips to the ceiling in an attempt to gain one last breath before the honey completely fills the space. Her final choking gasps are sickly and sweet as the honey fills her lungs. Agent 2 keeps running through the tunnel of pipes. His hand no longer hurts, at least, either from the shock or from the fact that all the nerve endings have been burned away.
Whoa, wait, what was this? He flash?
Horrible sounds coming from the pipes seem to have stopped too. Maybe he really would make it out of this alive. Lon might have found another way out too. There's no telling how many routes through this maze of
I was
pipes
dead, no matter
exist.
what. I
He
wasn't
would
in the right
probably
form.
exit the building to find her outside waiting for him. Poor Agent
got
6,
this still.
though. He never had a chance after opening that cover on the MRV. His thoughts are abruptly interrupted, though, when his foot catches on an unseen pipe and he falls forward onto the floor. Or rather, he should have fallen on the floor. Instead, a pit opens up in the ground, leading to a steep, sloping floor of pipes. He screams and tries to stop himself, but the slick liquid covering everything makes it impossible for him to slow his descent.
We almost
He
had it.
begins to slide down the pipes. His dimming flashlight shows what seemed to be an endless tunnel of pipes stretching down into the dark. The tube
He
of
goes to
pipes
fix his
twisted
shit.
this way and that, slamming him into the walls on either side, tumbling him head over feet.
You said he been
The
playing all
descent
day
never
and
seemed to
this ain't
end.
happening. What
He
happened?
screamed until his voice went hoarse, then gave out entirely. He didn't have any way to mark the passage of time, other than when his flashlight finally started to flicker and then dim, before finally dying. He slid down the endless tunnel
Yeah,
of pipes for
Camille's
what
crying.
felt like
I could've
days
fucked
in
her
the
up, though.
darkness, far deeper than they physically should have been able to go. When the
Be back
friction
when
of the
Goose back.
pipes began to tear his skin away, it was almost welcome. At least there would finally be an end. Following the loss of the SCP-015 recovery team, the data on the modular robotic vehicle was deemed non-vital, and no further expeditions were authorized in order to try and recover it. SCP-015 is a mass of pipes, vents, boilers, and other various plumbing apparatuses that have completely filled an otherwise nondescript warehouse located in a major American city. Anytime the warehouse is not being directly observed, the pipes will begin to grow, filling nearly all of the available space in the building, but also trying to connect to other nearby structures through the sewer and other subterranean infrastructure systems. The current best estimate of Foundation researchers is that the building contains over 190 kilometers of pipes, which range from just 2.5 centimeters to over 1 meter in diameter. While some of these pipes will look new, others have the appearance of being rusted or damaged, with many showing signs of leaking. The pipes are made of a strange assortment of materials as well, including bone, wood, steel, pressed ash, human flesh, glass, and granite. Oddly, no pipes composed of lead, PVC plastic, copper, or any other material one would normally expect to be used for the production of pipes have been found. But by far the strangest anomalous quality of SCP-015 is that it appears to react to aggressors. Should the building detect that the personnel inside of it are carrying tools, or if they make any attempt to either damage or repair any of its pipes, they will trigger an immediate reaction. Pipes near the offending subject will often burst, spraying them with a variety of liquids that have included oil, mercury, rats, a species of insect not yet identified, ground glass, seawater, entrails, and molten iron. More and more pipes will continue to burst around the subject until they either retreat from SCP-015 or are killed. SCP-015 was discovered by the Foundation after reports that pipes emanating from a warehouse had mysteriously started to connect to multiple other nearby structures, with no obvious answer for how or why they had suddenly begun emerging from the structure. The pipes were eventually able to be cut back and are now solely within the warehouse once again, but the human cost of containing SCP-015 has been high, and so far, 11 SCP personnel have been killed in their interactions with the anomaly, and an additional 20 are still missing. All of the missing are presumed to also be dead, though there have been reports of banging and screaming coming from within the building that may indicate they are still alive in some form. SCP-015 has been classified as Euclid, and because the building itself is impossible to move, it has been effectively contained on site. The Foundation maintains a gap of at least 2 meters around the warehouse, and no structures are allowed to be built that make contact with the building's outer walls. Should any protrusions from SCP-015 be detected, the pipes are to be immediately capped and sealed. Internal exploration of SCP-015 is permitted with approval from senior staff, but following numerous losses within the site, expedition teams must consist of 3 members, all of whom are equipped with safety lines and GPS tracking. The teams are not allowed to bring any hand or power tools within the building, nor are they to attempt any repairs or maintenance of any kind while inside. There's no need to enforce these rules, though, seeing as SCP-015 appears more than happy to terminate the offenders itself. The SCP Foundation contains many anomalous locations, though SCP-015 may just be one of the strangest. But decide for yourself by comparing it to SCP-024, another abandoned building with secrets of its own to be found inside. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single anomaly as we delve further and further into the SCP Foundation's classified archives.
An SCP Foundation doctor wearing a hazmat suit is escorted by 2 guards through the secure facility. They stop in front of a large, sealed door, and one of the guards scans his security card. There's an audible hiss as the door slides open. The doctor nervously looks to the guard, who motions him inside. They certainly won't be joining him. The doctor steps into the small airlock, and the door snaps shut. A complicated locking mechanism seals the door behind him. He's truly locked in. The reverse process then begins on the locked door in front of him. It finishes, and the door opens, revealing a room with bright lights that briefly blind the doctor. As his eyes adjust, he can see that the entire room is white and bathed in an intense light. He steps out of the airlock and towards the center of the room, where his task awaits. He takes one slow step at a time, pausing for a moment after each before taking the next. The doctor wants to get this over with as quickly as possible, but he has to abide by the protocols, and this is how they dictate that one must walk in this containment chamber. As the doctor gets closer to the center, and his eyes further adjust to the bright light, he can finally see what this room contains. In the very middle of the room, directly under the lights, is a man. He's lying on a table and isn't moving at all, except for his slow, rhythmic breathing, which is assisted by the ventilator he's connected to. A feeding tube has been placed inside his nose, and numerous machines next to the man hum and beep as they measure his vital signs. The doctor continues to take one slow step after another and eventually, after what feels like an eternity, he reaches the middle of the room. The lights above the man are angled to create large, dark shadows coming off of him, and now the doctor is finally close enough to make out what he was warned about in his briefings. Even though the man is completely still, the shadows are moving. Scurrying on the edges of the man's shadow are what look to be spiders, and big ones too, roughly 3 inches across. But the doctor can't see any actual spiders on the man. Only the shadows of these massive arachnids are visible as they move back and forth along the man's shadow. The doctor is growing increasingly nervous. He can feel the sweat dripping down the inside of his hazmat suit, though he tries to tell himself it's just a result of the bright lights beating down on him. The doctor reaches the machines measuring the man's vital signs and jots down their readings, marking down that the man's medically induced coma appears stable. He's continually distracted from his work, though, by the movement of the spiders. One suddenly jumps from one part of the man's shadow to another, startling the doctor and causing him to jump back. The spiders abruptly stop moving, and even though he can't see their eyes, he has the feeling that they are looking right at him. The doctor is frozen with fear, staring right back at the spiders. But after a moment, they go back to their previous behavior and start crawling along the edge of the comatose man's shadows once more. The doctor continues to go down his checklist and audibly gulps. He's reached the final item, the one labeled physical exam. Nervous sweat runs down his face into his eyes, and he wishes he wasn't wearing this hazmat suit so he could wipe it off. He knows he must get much closer to the man, and more importantly, his shadow, than he feels comfortable with. He has to physically take the man's pulse, though. They won't let him out of this room if he doesn't. He reaches out towards the man's hand, slowly and carefully. He can see the shadow of his hand getting dangerously close to the man's shadow, and the spiders. One of the spiders stops moving, as if it is watching and waiting for the doctor's shadow to get closer. It raises up on its hind legs, looking like it is ready to pounce. The doctor gets closer and closer to the man's hand, when out of nowhere, the room is rocked by an explosion. The doctor spins around, and on a monitor next to the airlock door, he can see a feed of the hallway outside. The guards who had escorted him run down the hall as a red emergency light flashes. He turns back to the man on the table. The spider that was waiting for him lowers itself out of its attack mode and goes back to scurrying along the shadow. The room is shaken by an even bigger explosion, and it suddenly goes dark. The power must have gone out from whatever is happening outside. He can hear the sound of muffled gunfire mixed with far-off screams, but both are drowned out by his nervous, heavy breathing inside of the suit. The doctor drops to the ground and tries to crawl back to the door, but he has no idea which direction it is. He hits his head hard and hears a crack come down his mask. That must have been the table. The doctor turns and crawls the other direction, eventually finding the airlock door. He stands up and bangs and pulls on the door, but it won't move. He fumbles with his hazmat suit and finds the button for his emergency light. A chemical light comes on inside of his suit, casting his face in a sickly yellow light. But the light starts to flicker. Something must be malfunctioning. The light on one side of his protective mask goes out, leaving half of his face in darkness. But that's the least of his problems, because all of his attention is now focused on the shadow moving across his face. It's the shadow of a spider. His eyes go wide as the spider stops and stands up on its rear legs. Arachnophobia, the fear of spiders, and sciophobia, the fear of shadows, are some of the most common phobias, and today's SCP file is a terrifying and dangerous combination of both. I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-538, also known as the Shadow Spiders. SCP-538 is what appears to be a kind of living shadow, not dissimilar to SCP-017, though these shadows always take the form of an unknown species of spider. These anomalous arachnids seek out the shadows cast by other living objects, attaching themselves to the edge of the living creature's shadow in such a way that their own shadows aren't obscured. Once attached to a shadow, the spiders will appear to feed off of them. This allows them to rapidly grow in size, with adults measuring a total area of roughly 15 square centimeters. Once they reach their full size, they will continue to feed, though this will only maintain their size. The feeding process seems to not impact the host in any way, and the spiders can remain on a shadow indefinitely. While the spiders have been observed feeding on the shadows of inanimate objects when no living creatures are available, These don't appear to provide the spiders with whatever nutrients they require, and they will slowly atrophy and decrease in size. It is only when they are connected to the shadow of a living organism that SCP-538 can thrive. SCP-538 are not locked to the shadow they are on, though. The spiders have shown the ability to move across areas to reach a new host, though they will decrease in size when not attached to a shadow, losing as much as 2 square centimeters of their size for every second that they aren't on a shadow. And should they be stranded in the open without a shadow to feed on, they will decrease in size until they disappear completely, at which point that individual instance of SCP-538 is considered to be terminated. The spiders normally avoid this fate thanks to their extremely fast movement, though, and fully grown instances have been measured moving up to 1 meter per second. While SCP-538 instances are usually quite benign, seeming content to simply live on the shadow of their host, they will attack if they are frightened, which is when the real danger presented by these anomalous arachnids comes to light. If the spiders are agitated, usually from the result of a rapid movement by its host, the spider will bite the organism's shadow before attempting to flee. Once bitten, the unlucky individual will progress through 5 distinct stages, all of which take place over the course of roughly 1 hour. During the first, the subject will report pain in the area of their body that corresponds to the part of their shadow that was bitten, but no puncture wounds or other marks will be visible in this location. Minor psychological effects have been reported in this stage, mostly consisting of an increase in irritability and the tendency for the bitten subject to lash out at those around them. The second stage occurs 10 to 15 minutes after being bitten. The subject will begin sweating, despite reporting that they feel cold, while their skin will become red and warm to the touch. 25 to 30 minutes after the bite, the third stage will begin. At this point, the psychological effects become very noticeable, with the subject becoming violent and attempting to attack any person nearby. Their speech will be slurred, and they may show signs of impairment to their motor skills. The fourth stage begins at the 40 to 45 minute mark, and at this point, the subject's skin color will go from being red to a pale white as their core temperature drops 5 to 8 degrees Celsius. Their psychological state will alter once again, and they will go from being extremely aggressive to overly apologetic, blaming their previous behavior on the fact that they weren't feeling well and weren't acting like themselves. After offering their apologies, they will then request their leave from the area and attempt to retreat to a darkened area. The fifth and final stage happens 55 to 60 minutes after the bite, at which point the subject faces a grisly end to the entire ordeal. Their entire body will rapidly dissolve into a translucent liquid, while at the exact same time, their shadow will disintegrate into numerous smaller instances of SCP-538. The spider offspring measure just 4 centimeters across, and the new instances will immediately begin seeking out shadows of their own that they can attach to and feed off of. There is currently no known cure for being bitten by an SCP-538 instance, and even death will not halt the process. Instead, should the subject expire while in the earlier stages of the condition, death will cause the final step to occur immediately. In a bit of good news, only bites to the area of an individual's shadow that correspond to a spot of bare skin seem to cause these effects. Even thin materials like cotton clothing appear to be enough to prevent the process from starting. The SCP Foundation has multiple instances of SCP-538 in containment, and they are kept in a white 15 by 15 by 3 meter room that is accessible only via an airlock. 4 200-watt lights are focused on a table in the center of the room, where D-Class personnel in a medically induced coma is kept in a stable state in order to serve as a feeding source for the SCP-538 specimens. No other sources of shade are allowed into the room, so that the D-Class serves as the only source of shadows. Any personnel that enter the room, whether to repair a light source or to check on the condition of the D-Class, are to wear sealed hazardous material suits equipped with oxygen tanks, and are advised that they must move slowly and deliberately in order to avoid agitating any instances of SCP-538. Initially, doctors sent to examine the D-Class personnel were allowed to enter the room alone. However, following the events of Incident I-538-1, that protocol has been changed. During the incident, an attack by the Chaos Insurgency caused disruptions to both the main and backup power sources to the part of the site where the SCP-538 containment cell is located, just as a Foundation doctor was in the middle of an examination of the comatose D-Class. Power outage led to all lights in the containment cell shutting off,
while at the same time
You got it,
sealing
Goose?
the airlock that provides the only means in or out of the room and trapping the doctor inside.
Alright, well, let me go take.
The power was not able to be restored to the containment cell for another 18 hours, at which point the doctor was finally removed from the cell. The doctor sobbed uncontrollably as he kept repeating that he could feel them crawling all over him. The doctor was required to attend mandatory psychological therapy for his newly developed arachnophobia and was later reassigned. Following this incident, the examination protocol was updated, and health checkups of the D-Class personnel are now performed by a doctor who is accompanied in the cell by 2 security personnel, each of whom are equipped with 2 250-watt flashlights that can be used in the event of another disruption to the lights. If at any time a staff member is bitten by one of the spiders, they are to be immediately placed within SCP-538's containment cell as soon as possible, as the failure to properly contain them could easily lead to a massive containment breach by SCP-538 entities. Bitten individuals will often attempt to hide the fact that they are bitten, so anyone who comes into contact with the shadow spiders must be carefully monitored for signs of any of the symptoms that follow a bite. The ease with which they could quickly spread and the huge threat they pose to humanity has led to SCP-538 being classified as Euclid. And while the Foundation hopes that they have been successfully contained, we all must remain ever vigilant of movement on the edge of shadows. Should you spot something, don't take any chances. Your future non-liquefied body will thank you for it. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, and make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single anomaly as we delve further and further into the SCP Foundation's classified archives.
Hello, Discover Card here to explain our cashback match. We match all of the cashback you earn at the end of your first year, automatically. It's that simple. Discover. Exceptionally common sense. Learn more at discover.com/match. Limitations apply.
This happened when I first moved out. I rented a small place and started working as a pizza delivery guy. It was a local shop. The work pressure was moderate throughout the weekdays, but during weekends, we hardly had time to relax. I generally did day shifts, but due to the bulk of orders, I had to do night shifts on weekends too. I was quite happy to do night shifts, being honest. It gave me a lot of time to relax during the day, and also, people got paid good tips on night orders on weekends. Our boss provided us 3 bikes and 1 car to go for the deliveries. The car was especially for night shifts, because driving through the empty highways amidst the woods at night is quite unsafe on a 2-wheeler. It was a Saturday night. I got 3 deliveries back to back. The first 2 deliveries were close, but the last one was on the outskirt of the town. After 5 minutes of drive in the town, I drove onto a dusty road. The GPS tracker showed me the way. I was driving amidst the dense forest. My car headlights were the only light around me. I could hear the owls hooting and the crickets chirping in the distance. After continuing like this for a while, my GPS tracker showed me a turn on my left. As I reached near the turn, I noticed a dark road going that way. Without GPS, I would have surely missed this turn. It was 11 p.m. when I finally reached the location. A sketchy-looking wooden house stood in front of me. I got out of my car, holding the pizza box in one hand and my phone in the other. The house was in complete darkness. I walked to the main door and rang the doorbell. The porch light lit up above my head. I felt a bit relieved that someone is inside. I was standing there, waiting for the door to open, just when a woman spoke from the inside. "Who is it?" I said in an awkward tone. Ma'am, it's me, the pizza delivery guy." A few moments went in silence. The door half opened. A terrified-looking partial face peeked from the darkness. It was a woman. I could only see her one wide eye. She then said, "Oh, it's really you." I smiled awkwardly and said, "Yes, ma'am. Here's your order." She opened the door and took the pizza box from my hand. I have been to many houses and have seen lots of creepy owners, but this woman was literally making my skin crawl. She then said, "I will have to go upstairs and bring the money. Till then, if you want, you can wait inside." She then started to walk upstairs. It was a bit chilly outside, so I entered the living room and decided to wait there. The living room was very untidy. Dirty clothes were lying in a corner. I don't know why, but a rancid smell was floating all over the room. Another thing that caught my eye was the woman's wedding photos. Even though the house was super messy and unclean, the photographs were in good shape, as if someone cleaned them recently. There were 4 to 5 photos in the living room. The one big photo of her wedding hung on the wall right in front of me. It was a really big frame. The woman was standing beside a lean, pale-looking man. She was smiling really big, as in ear to ear. To some extent, the photo felt very unusual. Especially, that man's face didn't seem at all happy to me. Anyways, prying in our customer's life is a strict no-no for us, so I stopped thinking all this shit. I was becoming impatient as this woman was taking really long. This was the last delivery of the night, so I wanted to get the payment and the fuck out of here as soon as possible. I said in a loud voice, "Ma'am, where are you? It's getting late now. Can you please hurry up? I have a long drive home." The woman didn't respond, but after a few seconds more, I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. As I looked up, I saw the woman coming down with that ear-to-ear smile on her face like that photograph. I didn't notice all this time that she was actually wearing her wedding dress. The dress is completely torn out and dusty. It was in such a bad shape that no one can spot it without seeing her wedding photos. She looked at me and said in a scary voice, "Don't I look beautiful in my wedding dress?" Now, I got hella awkward and replied, "Ma'am, please make
what the
payment
fuck
so
are we
I can
doing?
leave. It's getting very late now." She raised her skinny pale hand towards me and said, "Take it."
Shut
As I
up.
reached
You
to take
sit
the money
back in
from her
here,
hand,
motherfucker.
she dropped the cash on the floor. I thought it was an
Nah,
honest
yo.
mistake, so I got down to
I'm a
pick it up
Nami
from
main.
the
That's the
floor.
first champ I had
While
tail
I was
banner.
picking
Fuck
up the
out of
money,
here.
my eyes went to the couch, kept in the middle of the living room. My blood froze then and there.
Trying to be like my
I didn't
champ
know
like your
what
daddy.
to say because I saw a dead body lying under the couch. The dead body had started to rot, which clarified the rancid smell all over the house. I could
Nah,
identify
that's
the body in
bullshit.
a way.
You found that on
This
eBay.
is the mistress of the house. She opened the door and a few seconds ago let me in. But if she is dead, then who is standing in front of me right now? I
No,
slowly
it's not.
looked up and saw the woman
It's not
standing
Goose,
there,
yo. It's not
leaning on my
Goose. It
face.
didn't stop at
Her eyes were dusting
90%.
out. Her smile made me feel like I've been drowned in the darkest darkness. She laughed and said in a demonic voice, "Don't I look beautiful in my wedding dress?" I screamed at the top of my lungs and ran for my life.
Oh,
After getting out of the house, I looked back once. Only once. The woman was still standing at the doorway.
like,
She was
you
laughing
go to
like
Iron
a
Age at
creature from
9,
hell.
then let's
Her
say
laugh was
10:30.
echoing all
Yeah, you got an
around
Iron
me.
Age in Florida, yo?
I started the car with trembling hands and drove as fast as possible.
Do you have an Iron
I
Age
went
in
straight
Florida?
home that night. The
It's
next
Korean
morning, I
barbecue,
called
but
my
you
boss
cooked the meat
and
yourself
told him
in
this
front,
entire
like in
thing.
a table.
He laughed at me at
I didn't
first
say all
and
that. I
said
said
I
Iron
might
Age,
have been
motherfucker. There's a
hallucinating.
difference.
But then I went to the cops and told
Oh,
them
my
to check
bad, my
themselves.
bad.
Everyone was obviously mocking me at the beginning. When
Yeah,
we all
I
got into
didn't.
the house,
I didn't know
we
I
all
was
got
such.
shocked
I didn't know I was
and
so
terrified,
low at the
just like
totem
me.
pole, yo.
The cops
My
discovered the
bad.
woman's dead body underneath the couch.
Yeah, for real.
She was lying there dead for at least 2 to 3 days. I told the cop that she was the one who opened the door, and I didn't at all hallucinate the entire incident. But the horror didn't just stop there. After searching the entire house, the cops found another dead body. They found a dried corpse tied up to a chair in the basement. It was a man's corpse. Someone starved him to death. The cops investigated the entire matter, and the story unfolded, scaring the hell out of all of us. The man and the woman were living in the house. The woman was very suspicious in her married life. She drove her husband crazy whenever he used to go outside. One day, the husband got paranoid about his wife and decided to leave her. The wife somehow managed to drug him in his sleep and then tied him to a chair so that he could never leave her. But during this process, she tortured her husband, which eventually led to his death. The woman turned into a lunatic after her husband died, and she too committed suicide. I have stopped working as a delivery guy at night. Even though it was the most horrifying incident of my life, I still find it really uncomfortable that the woman's spirit found me to make her story heard. Before I begin this story, I want to warn everyone to stay away from dark web. Last month, I had a small gathering at my place. I invited a couple of my office
Yeah,
colleagues,
the game
and we
been
all
crashing for a
drank
lot of
and
people.
watched
They even
the
put in a
football
fucking
match.
thing
It
too,
was a
saying
men's
that.
night out, hence everyone
Oh
got
my
really
god,
drunk and lost track
not
of time.
me.
There were 3 of us.
Let's not make
me
this,
and my 2 colleagues, Max and Andy. We work in the IT department.
Don't let me get used
of
to
a
this Nami
multinational
thing, cause
company.
I'll go fucking
The
Nami
night was
mid
going
in real
well,
life.
but suddenly, Max brought up the topic of dark web. He said in a serious tone, "Very few people have the
I'm not
guts
healing
to surf
nobody,
the
so
dark
fuck
web.
out of here.
If you lost your way there, you have no idea what horrible things will come up."
That
In
was
my
that
college
was.
days,
Oh my
I
god.
also accessed dark web once or twice, but nothing horrible took place. I said in a mocking tone.
He
"Well,
dipped. Oh,
I
he
think people
dipped.
spread a lot of rumors
He's in the
about
bus.
the dark web. It's not that dangerous at all." Andy said, I never want to step in that arena. One of my college seniors told me that a guy ordered drugs from the dark web once, but instead, someone sent him the dust of human bones, which he snorted.
Bananas.
I said in a surprised voice, "What? What happened to him?" Andy replied while taking a sip from his beer bottle, "That guy barely got out alive. My senior told me he bled terribly
Sir.
from his nose." I laughed and said, "I think your senior lied, dude. I can show you dark web is not that scary at all." I got up and turned on my laptop. Max and Andy sat beside me on the couch, and we started to surf the dark web using the Tor browser.
I tried to
I
flash
was
out.
drunk and got adamant. I still regret going to the dark web just to prove a stupid point that night. I was going through the hidden wiki of the dark web. There were a bunch of links to various sites. We found a site that helps you to hire a hitman, and then a site where you can upload torture videos and earn money from the viewership. The more I searched, the weirder everything started to become. Max said, "Dude, can't believe some people can be this creepy in real life." I was about to click a new page when Andy pulled my attention to a link. The link read, http://truefootages.onion. I said, "Let's check out this link." Max grabbed my hand and said, "I don't think we should click
You
on
and this
random
bitch.
links, Matthew. Let's just get out of this and watch the game. Seems like you are not one of those people who have the guts to surf the dark web, huh?" I later realized how I insulted him, but I know I should have listened to Max that night. Without saying anything more, I clicked on the link. The screen started to load. Andy and Max kept staring at the screen with big wide eyes. I thought it would be some kiddish jump scare or something similar to that. But as
Yo,
the
why you
page
not
finished
healing me?
loading, a zip file started
Rock
to
a diff.
download on my laptop. Andy said, "Hey,
Get away from my butthole.
can be some virus, you know. It can crash your machine." I replied saying, "I have a strongly built antivirus and the system would have
No,
blocked
fuck
the
outta
download
here.
if it was a virus in the first place."
You stay away from me.
Anyways, after
No,
the
I need
file
this. I need
downloaded,
this so I can run
extracted it
fast,
from my
yo.
laptop, and
You good
it
to
came
be.
across with 3 MP4 files in it. I finished my beer in one sip and said, "Are you ready to watch some dark web footages?" and smirked. Max and Andy were curious too, so they nodded.
Whee!
As I played the first footage, a small wooden house appeared on the screen. The house was located in the countryside. The person who took the footage
He
started to
said,
walk
"You
towards the house.
dumbass."
As he opened the door, we saw old furniture and damp clothes lying here and there. It was evident from the condition of the house that no one lives there. We could hear the heavy breathing of the person who had the camera in his hand, but it was hard to guess whether it's a man or a woman. The person stopped near the stairs, standing in the living room. I was obviously getting bored, but suddenly, Andy said in a whispering tone, "Did you hear that sound?"
Keep that tongue a
I
lickety
asked,
away.
"What sound?" He said, "Listen carefully. I think someone's crying." I immediately increased the volume and realized Andy is right. There was actually the sound of a man sobbing. The man was crying like he's in terrible pain. The camera started to go upstairs. Now, our heartbeats got faster. As the person with the
Oh,
camera
God.
reached upstairs, the video ended. Without any hesitation.
Yo, what is this
I pressed the second
item?
video. The second video started showing a corridor lying ahead of the camera. This time, the cry could be heard more clearly. The camera kept moving towards the corridor.
What?
The door. Max said, "I think there's someone inside the room."
For
Andy
offensive
shook his
items.
head. "Watch it quietly."
Ole, what
Now,
the fuck?
The person behind the camera went to open the doorknob, and we saw a pale-looking skinny hand with lots of rings on its fingers. The red nail polish on those fingers made the hand look even creepier. We realized it's a woman, probably in her late 40s, filming this video. As she twisted the doorknob and opened the door, a vicious sight took place. There was an old man tied up to a chair placed in the middle of the room. It was this man's who cry we heard on the first footage. Seeing the woman with the camera, the man started to cry even louder. The fearful look on his face made it all look so real. The man said in a sobbing and gasping voice, "Please, Julia, let me go. Why are you doing this to me? Please, don't hurt me. Let me go, Julia." We heard the woman laughing in a very disturbing way. It was evident from her laughter that she was enjoying this man's pain. She placed the camera on a wooden stand or something like that. Now the camera is still, and it is focusing.
Yeah, you need to sell that Bambi, that plated steel caps, that null magic mantle, and that cloth armor.
Real?
Sell all of
I
it.
got really confused. I wasn't expecting something like this at all. The man kept sobbing, and there was no sign of that woman for a few moments. Suddenly, the woman jumped in front of the camera from the
Let's
left
just
corner.
end this game.
It almost gave us all a heart attack. She started to laugh, looking at the camera like a maniac. Her eyes were big and she had a pale face. The way she stared at the camera, it gave us all goosebumps. Max even said, "I feel like she can see me. What the hell is this all?" The woman slowly moved her head and looked at the man. Then, she again looked back at the camera and gestured her finger in her lips. Andy said, "This woman is freaking insane. Is she telling us to keep quiet? What kind of bizarre video is
Downhill.
this?" I was speechless with everything that was happening in front of my eyes. The woman picked up something from the ground. We couldn't see what it was, but as soon as she started to walk towards the man's behavior changed in a second. The man started to panic like a fish out of water. He said, "No, Julia, no, you can't do this to me.
He upgraded
I
to
am
Frostfire
your husband.
and
Julia,
Bramble Vest.
Please, don't do this." The woman reached behind his back and lifted her hand. She was holding a chainsaw in her hand. Her evil smile made my heart drop to my stomach. She again looked at the camera and shifted like before. The man was crying and sobbing, and the video ended there. The three of us sat silently on the couch, looking at the laptop screen flashing the third video file on it. I was literally shivering. Max was breathing heavily. Andy said in a trembling voice, "Should we watch the last video? What do you think happens in that?" Max got up and said, "Damn you, Matthew, I told you to stop." I hit my face with my palm. My forehead was covered with sweat. Then I said,
Kill them all.
I don't know." Andy played the last video. What we saw next shook us for our entire lives. The man was no more on that chair. The wall behind him was painted in blood. There was blood splattered all over the room. Our eyes were stuck on the screen. Our hearts were beating like wild horses. When we saw that woman coming in front of the camera from the left side again, her head was down looking at the floor. Her hair covered her partial face. I could tell she was holding something in her hand. She then stopped and turned towards the camera. Her face was still looking down. She started to cry like a child. Her cry was making everything even more uncomfortable now. She cried, standing like that for a few more seconds, and then suddenly lifted her hand
my fucking
with
hell.
the bloody head of her dead husband. Yes, she was holding the severed head
Alright,
of
end
that
the
man in
game.
the chair. She started to laugh like a maniac while showing off his head towards the camera. Her eyes were glowing. She was looking like the devil from hell. Max gasped. "Oh my God, did she really kill her husband with a chainsaw?" And immediately started to throw up on the floor. I was numb. I couldn't move, couldn't take my eyes away. The woman then got really close to the camera and gestured her bloody finger onto her lips and said in a whispering voice, "Shh, keep quiet." The video ended there. All of us remained awake the entire night. Andy got really sick. We admitted him to the hospital as he had a nervous breakdown after watching the video. We took the footage to the cops and told them everything. The cops are still investigating and looking for a woman named Julia who cut her husband's head off with a chainsaw and posted the entire incident on the dark web. If anyone comes across this woman, please let the cops know about it. I have no doubt that she is a mentally unstable woman roaming free with murderous intentions hidden inside. I work as a staff member in a city hospital morgue. It has been 5 years now, but I still get horrible nightmares of one particular incident. The morgue is in the basement.
If only
of the
you
building.
built
I am a male in
offensively.
my late 20s. I was well aware of the mental impact
I mean,
caused by such
let me
kind of
rephrase that.
jobs.
If only you played the right
Residing
way.
12 hours in a morgue is not very entertaining. That's for sure. At the beginning of my
Oh
tenure,
no, not my Spotify.
I was often assigned to day shifts. After working there for 2 years without any trouble, one day my supervisor called me for an emergency meeting. My supervisor told me that the guy who used to work the night shifts has recently left the job, so they need someone to cover for him until a new recruitment arrives. I accepted the shift to impress my higher authorities, and they handed me over a new schedule. I got assigned for the night shift from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. for a week. The first 3 days went like
Do I
usual,
want to?
but I must say at night, it felt really spooky.
Hold on real quick though.
To pass the time, I often took rounds of the morgue. Sometimes, I used to visit the emergency
I'm gonna go grab some water. I'll be right back.
above me. One night, I was sitting in my cabin and drafting the reports, just when a colleague of mine called me to the emergency ward. After reaching there, I came to know that a patient in cabin number 3 has just passed away. The man met with a horrible accident. I saw 2 to 3 doctors coming out of cabin 3. Their white jackets were drenched in blood. I got instructions to take the dead body into the morgue, and post-mortem will take place the next morning. I have seen enough dead bodies already, but as I stepped inside the cabin, my heart stopped. With wide, shaken eyes, I saw a completely mutilated corpse lying on the bed. There was blood all over the bed. Flesh was gushing out from the cuts on his legs and hands. But that wasn't the scariest part. As I noticed the man's face, a chill went down my spine. His head was faced towards me, with a wide open mouth. The man was staring at me. His eyes were cold and dead still. For a moment, I felt the man blinked at me. Just then, my colleague patted me on my back, and I came back to my senses. My colleague said, "Come on, John, what are you waiting for?" I didn't say anything and started my work. I lifted the corpse onto a stretcher and headed towards the morgue. I got onto the lift. For the first time in my life, I was feeling uncomfortable inside an empty lift with a dead body. After reaching the morgue, I unzipped the back cover, and once again, that vicious face came out. I put the body inside the vault and came back to my cabin. I sat down and started to write the reports again. There was absolute silence in the basement area. Generally, that's how things often are at night in the morgue section. But the silence of that night made my skin crawl. Don't know how long I went with my work, but a sudden sound broke my concentration. I heard footsteps outside, as if someone is walking in the
Avon, let's
corridor.
go, let's go.
I got up and came out of my cabin. The room where the dead bodies are kept lies at the end of the corridor. I saw the doors were closed.
Hey,
The
nah, I'm
corridor
about to get off.
was
My bad. I
completely
was trying to
empty.
confirm
I
something,
was
yo.
walking towards the
So I had
main
to
room
wait.
when suddenly
Oh
I
my
felt someone
god.
was walking behind me.
Listen,
I
it's an
turned
accident.
around, but there wasn't anyone. I blamed my stupid
I'm about
head
to go
for
play
imagining all
Minecraft with my
this.
girl.
The main room was perfectly fine.
I'm gonna have
Everything was in its place.
fun.
Only the door of vault
I miss
number
you
3
all. Oh, no.
was wide open. This is the vault where I kept the man's dead body a few hours
We were
back.
friends until
With a
then.
sense of fear, I reached near the vault and pulled out the stretcher. The man's body was still lying on it, but this time, his wide mouth was closed. Not just that, a weird grin appeared on his face. It felt like he was looking at me with his dead eyes and smirking at me. I said to myself, fuck it. I am going home. I immediately pushed the stretcher back inside and decided to leave for home.
You ready, Chris?
I planned to call my supervisor and make up a story about feeling sick. I was almost near the exit of the main room when I heard a sound coming behind me. I turned around and saw the man crawling out of that vault like a creature from hell. His entire body was covered in blood. His eyes
Come on, Chris.
were even wider now, as if they
Say
will
what?
come out anytime. I couldn't move, and kept witnessing this horror in front of my eyes. The man came out and stood on the floor. Blood was dripping from his body. The entire floor beneath his feet turned red with blood. I said in a panicked voice, You are supposed to be dead." But the man laughed in a very low, creepy voice and replied, "You know what's the best part about being dead? You don't feel anything anymore." I couldn't believe that I was standing face to face with a living dead body. I was about to scream when the man rushed to my face. I can't explain how he did that, but it was like he swept his way like wind and stopped right at my face. His eyes were right in front of mine. I didn't know what to do then, but an idea came to my mind. I asked him, "What do you want? Please, let me help you." The man now looked up and said, "I was poisoned before getting into the car. Tell them to check the post-mortem. They must know the truth, or she will live free." I was about to ask him, "Who?" But suddenly, the lift door opened, and I turned back. I saw my colleague upstairs coming towards the main room with a few doctors. He told me, "John, you still here? There's hardly any work here today. You could have left early today." I looked back at the vault, and everything seemed like nothing happened here a few moments back. There was no sign of blood or that man. Feeling messed up in my head, I started to walk to my cabin. But before getting inside, I told my colleague and those doctors. I don't know why, but I feel like there was some other reason behind this man's death. He didn't just die because of the accident. They all gave me a surprised look, but I got inside, took my bag, and left for home. The next morning, I got a phone call from a colleague. He told me, "Oh my God, John, how did you know? I mean, it anyway would have come out in the post-mortem report, but how come you were so sure?" At first, I failed to understand what he meant, so I asked, "What are you talking about?" My colleague replied, "That man, the dead body recovered from the road accident last night, traces of poison has been found in his stomach. Doctors are saying he was poisoned before he got into the car. This is now a criminal case. Cops are all over the hospital." I started to sweat like hell. That means it all actually happened. The man's ghost was there in front of my eyes. I sat down at the chair nearby. It took me time to deal with the fact that I have not only experienced a supernatural occurrence, but also talked to the haunting spirit of a dead man. The case continued for a while until the cops arrested his girlfriend for poisoning him before he left her house. I realized that by she, the man meant her. I didn't leave my job after this incident. The man visited me for one last time. The day his girlfriend got sentenced for first-degree murder charges, I was working another night shift in the morgue. I just finished placing a corpse inside vault number 3. As I turned to go to my cabin, I saw that man standing in front of the lift. This time, he had a big smile on his face. His body was disfigured like before, but his face was looking more fearful than before. His ear-to-ear smiles still haunts me at night. I just stood there because I had no idea he will come to visit me again. But this time, he didn't say anything. He just lifted up his head. The flesh was hanging from it, making his bone gush out of them. Then, he waved me goodbye and disappeared into thin air. My girlfriend and I are passionate about road trips, but things wouldn't have taken a bad turn if our passion stayed within its limits. One rainy night, Stella and I were coming back from a road trip. The rain started to grow heavy. It was becoming difficult to drive amidst the rain and the thunderstorm, so we decided to stop at the side of the highway. I was worried that waiting on the highway during a thunderstorm is not a safe option. I was thinking what to do next when Stella said, "Look, Mark, there's a building on the left turn nearby." I followed her eyes and saw a building-type structure peeking behind the trees at some distance. Stella said, "Let's go there. We might find some shelter for the night." At that moment, it seemed like a good idea, so I took the left turn. As we stopped near the building, I realized it was an abandoned hospital. We got out from the car and ran inside. The big glass door of the entrance was already broken. As we entered the hospital, I realized no living creature has entered this place in a very long time. There was broken furniture and shattered glass everywhere. Raindrops were piercing the damp ceiling and falling on the floor. The sound of water dripping on the floor combined with the rusty wind coming in from the broken window created a spooky ambiance all around us. Stella said in a low voice, "This looks like an adventure." My wife Stella is a horror fiction writer. Hence, spooky settings like these excite her. We went to explore many abandoned and old places for her creative exploration. I smiled and said, "Yeah, let's look around. Who knows, you might get a story out of this place." If I knew my joke would take a horrifying turn, I would have left that place right then and there. Stella and I started to explore the place. We turned on the flashlights of our phones. On our left stood a passage. There were many cabins in the passage. We walked in the passage and opened the door of the first cabin. There was a worn-out, dirty bed inside. Near the bed stood a table and a chair. The odd thing that caught my eyes was belt straps attached to the handle of the bed. I have never seen such unusual hospital beds. Most of the cabins were like this. Every bed inside those cabins had belt straps attached to it. Stella got bored after a while and said, "There's nothing here to see. Let's go upstairs." We took the stairway on the right side. There were cobwebs and dirt all over the stairway. The upstairs corridor was filled with broken glass and damp clothes lying here and there. As I flashed the light on the walls, I saw disturbing graffiti all over them. There were human skulls and demonic faces drawn on those walls. Someone even wrote, "Kill them all. Kill," and stuff like that with red spray paint. I felt weird seeing all that. I told Stella, "Hun, maybe we should wait in the car. The rain will stop in some time." Stella replied in a sarcastic tone, "Why? Are you scared, Mark?" I didn't say anything because I knew she would mock me more. We were walking in the hallway. The sound of the rain outside mixed with the whooshing wind created a hollowed echo in the corridor. At the end of the corridor stood a large door. On the door was written, "Operation War." Stella was looking at the graffiti on the wall. I told her, "What do you think used to happen here?" Stella smiled and said, "It's an operation theater, Mark. Why are you behaving so off?" I said in an annoyed tone, "Because this place is not some theme park, Stella. The entire vibe of this place is off-putting. I don't know how can you not feel that?" Stella looked at me in the same careless manner and said, "Relax. This is just some abandoned hospital. We will look around a bit, then we'll leave. Stop making such a big deal out of it." I thought to myself, maybe I am just behaving like a dumb kid. It's quite clear that there's no one else here except the two of us. We reached the door of the operation theater. Stella pushed the door, and with a terrible creaking sound, the door opened. I have never seen such a bizarre operation table. It was more like a stretcher, but there were leather handcuffs and belts strapped on it. There was a headspace on the table, which too had a leather strap. This time, I noticed Stella's face turning pale. She was checking all this stuff with a really freaked out face. I went close to the operation table. There were surgical tools lying on it. The tools were quite different too. The surgical knives were more like saws. There was a drilling tool as well. I picked it up and said to Stella, "I wonder what is the use of this tool?" Stella looked around with her fearful eyes and said, "Oh my God, Mark, I don't think this is some ordinary hospital." I became surprised hearing that and said, "What? What do you mean?" Stella replied in the same fearful voice, "I think this used to be an asylum for, mentally unstable people. That's why there are belt straps and handcuffs all on the cabin beds. I think they had really violent patients." I realized she was right, but before I could ponder on this revelation for a few more seconds, my eyes went to the tip of the tool that I was holding in my hand. I said in a confused tone, "There's something on the tip of this drilling tool. Flash your light on it, Stella." As Stella flashed her light on the tool, we realized it was nothing but dried blood. Our hearts started to beat fast in fear. We inspected all the tools on the operation table and noticed almost all of them had dried blood spots. There was a freezer-type thing in the corner of that room. Stella rushed towards it and opened the door. As she looked into the freezer, she started screaming at the top of her lungs. I ran towards her and soon came across the horror lying in front of her eyes. The freezer had various types of jars. The jars seemed really old and a reeking smell was coming out of them. In each jar, there was a human body part in it. Some had an ear, some nose, human tongue, fingers, brains, and a human head. We couldn't believe our eyes. I took out the jar with a human head in it. Stella said, "I can't believe they used to treat the patients in such a gruesome manner." It was a man's head with his eyes closed. The face was horrible to look at, but what happened next still gives me the creeps when I think about it. Stella and I were inspecting the human head with a close look when suddenly the slitted head opened its eyes and started staring back at us. Out of fear and shock, we stepped back. The head then started to smile from ear to ear. Stella screamed as loud as she could, and we started to run for our life. As I looked back, I saw a group of black shadows following us. They were whispering in their own demonic language. They stretched their hands towards us and started to run. I said in a panicked voice, "Run, Stella, run! They're coming to get us!" Stella and I stormed out of the asylum and hopped inside our car. We could hear the cry of hundreds of people coming from the asylum. It was like people screaming in pain. As we started the car, the cries turned into maddening laughter. Without thinking much, I pushed the accelerator so hard that the car started making a screeching noise. I won't be able to explain if you ask me how we came back home. All I remember is that somehow we did, and which is why we are still alive. Stella later researched about that abandoned asylum. She talked to a few local people and collected some bizarre news on this matter. People said the asylum used to be a home for mentally disabled criminals, but the doctors running that place used to torture them and run many inhuman experiments on them. Local people are scared to go there, even in daylight. They believe numerous spirits of those tortured patients still haunt that place. Have you ever felt like this is probably the time where you are going to die? If you haven't, you are so damn lucky. This incident happened last week. The trauma of this incident is so fresh that I am still having a rough time recovering from it. I work in a pizza shop. My job includes taking orders and delivering them to customers at night. I have always worked the night shift and never faced any issues until now. Last week, I was standing near the counter when our shop's phone rang. I picked up and said, "Cheese man, can I take your order?" A man with a really grumpy and rough voice replied, "That's what I called, jackass." I felt a bit insulted by his behavior, but kept it to myself. The man ordered 2 large pizzas and gave an address of a house residing in the outskirts of the town. I told the chef to prepare the order. I checked the address using my GPS and realized it's going to be a 20-minute drive. I stacked the boxes on the front seat of the car and started for the destination. I was driving amidst the small townships. It was 10 p.m. at night, so the streets were completely empty. The yellow streetlights created a spooky atmosphere all around. I saw a house at the end of the street and realized this is the location. I parked my car near the house and got out. The house looked quite abandoned to me, as if people hardly lived there. But I saw the lights in the room upstairs. I walked to the main door and knocked. I could hear a whispering sound coming out of the house. No one opened the door, so I knocked again. This time, I heard footsteps. It felt like someone is coming down the stairs and walking towards the main door. The door opened after a few seconds. An angry-looking man with a rough bearded face stood in the doorway. His eyes were slightly red and he was smelling of whiskey. The man said in a rough voice, "What do you want?" Hearing his voice, I realized this is the same guy who insulted me on the phone. I said in a calm but firm voice, "Your pizza's here," and handed him the boxes. The man checked me out from head to toe and then paid me the money, saying, "You can go now." and slammed the door hard on my face. I thought to myself, what an asshole. This guy is surely fucking drunk, with no sense of manners. I got back to the car and was just about to start the engine when a sound came to my ears. The sound was so mellow that it took me a bit of time to figure out what it was. As I tried to listen closely, I figured out it was a sobbing sound of a little girl. I looked around, but there wasn't anyone. It was only me inside my car under a streetlight. I listened for a few seconds more and realized the crying sound was coming from the house where I just delivered the pizzas. It would have been possible that the drunk asshole had a little daughter and it was a matter of their personal life. But there was something in the cry of this little girl that kept pleading me not to leave. I slowly came out of the car and tiptoed to the house. I got close to the main door and tried to listen to the sounds coming from the house. The little girl was continuously sobbing, but I heard two more sounds this time. I heard two men talking in a really low voice, but their talking mode was so rough that I could hear almost everything they were speaking. The grumpy drunk who opened the door was saying to another man, "I told you to tie her mouth tightly." The other man replied, "I did, but she won't stop sobbing. Not everything is my fault, Brute." I said to myself, so this asshole's name is Brute? Brute replied in an angry voice, "I shouldn't have made you a partner in the first place. Can't even keep a 10-year-old girl quiet, jackass." They got into an argument with each other and started to use really obscene language. The girl's cry got louder. There was a small window on the house porch. I slowly peeked inside from the window, and what I saw scared the hell out of me. A little girl was lying on a dusty mattress on the floor. Her hands and legs were tied. Her mouth has been taped too. Her wide eyes looked fucking terrified. I could tell from her expression that she was in danger. The two men were sitting on the porch arguing. One was Brute the drunk guy, and the other was a bony, creeping-looking guy sitting right next to him. The entire scenario became crystal clear to me. I realized they are professional kidnappers and have abducted this little girl. This house is probably an abandoned house, which is why they chose this place to keep the girl. To be honest, I was really nervous at the beginning and thought to leave the place and inform the cops about it. I thought it would be better if the cops handled this matter. But then, I again looked at this little girl and realized how dangerous it would be if I just leave her here like this. Don't know what these two bastards will do to her, or what if they take her to some other place, or worse, kill her for ransom. With various thoughts going on in my head, I decided to take one step at a time, because there was no way I was leaving this little girl to die at the hands of these criminals. I made no sound and got to my car. I got inside it and called 911. I reported the entire situation very cautiously so that the kidnappers couldn't hear me. The nearest police station was about 20 minutes away from that area. They told me to keep my eyes open and they will be here as soon as they can. Even though I knew the cops were on their way, I couldn't just sit in the car and wait. I got out and started to walk towards the back side of the house. As I reached the back door, I saw those two men going upstairs. The little girl was lying on the ground like before. I said to myself, "Matthew, this is your only chance." Luckily, the back door of the house had a small entrance for dogs and cats. I put my hand through it and twisted the doorknob slowly. The door opened. I paused and listened carefully. Those men were still upstairs arguing. I tiptoed to the living room and reached towards the little girl. I turned her over and she started to panic at first. I shushed her by gesturing a finger on my lips and said in a whispering voice, "I am here to help you. The cops are on their way." She nodded her head. I stood up, started to untie her. She was sobbing like before. I understood this girl is extremely traumatized from what she is going through right now. Suddenly, I heard footsteps and I started to hurry up. I was almost done when I heard a thunder-striking voice from the stairs. "Hey, who the hell are you? What are you doing, you bastard?" I looked back and saw Brute was standing on the stairs. His face seemed like the hound from hell. He was breathing like a hungry wolf. I immediately took the little girl on my lap and started to run towards the door. Brute took out a huge knife and chased me. I was just close to the exit when he stabbed me on my leg. I screamed in pain because I knew he stabbed me deeply, but I didn't stop. The little girl started crying and screaming in fear, seeing blood coming out of my leg. I grabbed her tightly to my chest and ran as fast as I could. I got on the streets. I already said the streets were empty, and the next house was at 1 to 2 kilometers distance from this one. I knew I wouldn't make it that far because I turned around and saw those 2 criminals chasing me with sharp knives in their hands. I was just praying to God, please make the cops reach here before they get us. I could hear them saying, "Stop! I will kill you, you son of a bitch! Stop! Right now!" My leg was about to give up, and I realized that I should have gotten into the car. But I don't know if I could have driven it safely or not. While every hope of coming out of this alive with this little girl in my arms was dying in front of my eyes, I saw a flash of red and blue lights heading towards us. The cop's car's siren made me heave a sigh of relief. I turned back and saw Brute and that bony guy now running backward. I was sure that they have seen the cops and are trying to escape now. I stumbled on the ground and a lady cop came rushing towards me. As soon as she took the little girl from my arms, I lost my senses. I had to stay in the hospital for a week. The cops managed to reunite the girl with her parents and have arrested Brute and his partner. Doctors say I might have to limp while walking for the rest of my life. But when that little girl visited me in the hospital, her smile and the tears of joy on her parents' face made all my pain worth it. I am happy that I could save a little child's life on that night of pizza delivery. This true incident of my life can be quite disturbing for many viewers. I myself am also ramsacked by the impact of this incident that I can barely sleep at night. I would like to keep my identity hidden, so for the sake of the story, you can call me Ted. Since childhood, I was different than other kids of my age. I still remember the first time I witnessed death. I was playing in our backyard when a pigeon broke its neck and fell in front of my monster truck. I don't know why a thrilling sensation grabbed me that day. Instead of calling for help, I crushed the suffering pigeon with my truck. The pigeon flopped its wings, and blood kept flowing from its smashed head. As I grew up, this feeling of seeing blood flow grew too. I sometimes used to bite my own lips just to taste some drops of blood. I won't deny, I like the salty flavor of it, even more than any dessert. When I was 12 years old, my mother went to visit my grandmother, and I was home alone. Our neighbor next door came to cook some food for me. Miss Harrison made me some steaks that night. While chopping the meat, she accidentally cut her finger with our sharp kitchen knife. She went to the washroom to dress her wound and told me to wash the knife as it had drops of her blood. As soon as she disappeared from sight, I secretly licked the knife and tasted her blood. I won't lie, it felt amazing. Soon, I came to realize that I possess a very weird fantasy which, in other terms, can be compared to cannibalism. No matter how many types of meat I had my entire life, nothing beats the taste of human blood and flesh. With more days passing by, my weird fantasy started to make me anxious. I was looking for a way to make it come true by tasting actual human flesh. You must understand that I'm not a killer. My intention was never to hurt anyone on purpose, but I couldn't help myself with this hidden fantasy either. I was going through a troubled time then. My father died from a heart attack, and our family fell apart. He was admitted to the hospital for a long time. On the day of his death, when my mom and grandparents were busy talking to the doctors and paying the medical bills, I sneaked into the hospital morgue. I saw fresh dead bodies lying there. It was probably lunchtime, so there was no stuff there. I was completely aware of the security cameras, so I chose a dead body laying in the corner of the morgue. I carefully got close to it without revealing my face to the camera. I used a small surgical knife that I stole from my high school lab. I cut a few pieces of flesh from the body and ate it. Even though the flesh was a bit stiff, it tasted like heaven. I finally realized I am a cannibal. I finished high school and decided to study medical science so that I can remain close to dead bodies. My first year of college went by tasting dead people's meat. I used to cut out selective body parts from the cadavers kept in the lab of our medical school, then have them as my dinner. Things weren't great, but I was addicted to it. One day, I was sitting in my room and browsing through the dark web when I came across a site named Cannibal Cafe Forum. This cannibalistic forum is about eating people and being eaten by people. Here, people log in requests to get eaten or eat others, talk about their cannibalistic fantasies, For example, a note under the website read, "The Cannibal Cafe forum is dedicated to covering a full range of cannibalistic fantasy." The topics here deal with fantasies involving consenting adults. The more I searched that site, the more my curiosity increased. Some people willingly wanted to be victims of cannibalism. I was shocked and extremely excited to find out about this site. I logged on and started to take part in chats on that forum. I had no friends, no girlfriend, and I hardly visited my family after moving out for college. I wanted to keep my life as private as possible to avoid any source of suspicion from anyone. Every day, after coming back from college, my routine was to sit in front of my computer and explore the Cannibal Cafe forum. People posted ads on that forum, expressing their desire to get eaten and tasted by others. For me, it was like my own custom shopping site. I thought everything through and decided to post an ad myself. As I said already, I am not a killer, so all I wanted was a volunteer to make my fantasy come true. People used to talk about tasting human flesh, how to cut a human body in perfect pieces, what kind of recipes should be followed for a certain part of a body, and so on. I posted an ad that read, "Looking for a volunteering victim to assist for a few of my recipes. Interested candidates, mail me." Every night after coming home, I checked the page to see if someone has responded to my ad or not. A few weeks passed and nothing happened. I almost lost interest in this forum. I started to doubt the entire setup as a scam. A part of my mind kept telling me, none of this is actually real people. People who are claiming to be cannibals just like me are not at all criminals in real life. This is probably a hoax just to spook people about the dark web. I was on the verge of deleting my account and move on with my terrible secret when a reply popped up on my ad. It was a rainy Saturday night. I rented an apartment for myself. I used to work at a medical store on an internship basis to earn some cash. I had no social life as such, so my expenses were quite minimal in comparison to other college-going boys and girls. I came home completely drenched that day. I stormed into my room and opened my computer like every other day. I logged into the page and went to freshen up. While I took a shower in my bathroom, I kept hearing the sound of notifications coming from my computer. Within 5 to 7 minutes, I came back to my seat and saw 2 notifications. The first notification was a comment on my ad. I opened it up and saw a reply reading, "Hi, I am a 42-year-old woman. I would like to connect with you further. Please accept my chat request." The next notification was a request sent from a profile named Bloody Zoe. I knew this wasn't her actual name, but anyways, I accepted her request. Irrespective of her age, I was eager to talk to her because I wasn't looking for anything more than tasting actual flesh from a volunteering victim. As we started to chat, I kind of started to feel fascinated by her words. Zoe said that she too has a weird sensation towards the entire act of cannibalism. She was looking for an opportunity to be a part of this actual act, and that's when she found my ad. I asked her, many people have posted ads before me, so what made her interested in mine? To which she replied that she is new to the page and her fantasies are different from others. She wants me to cut her layers of skin slowly and taste her blood, but she doesn't want any gruesome violence or torture during the process. I knew then and there that she will be a perfect match. I told her that it will be great if she could meet me so we can take the matter forward. She says she will eventually, but before that, she will prefer if we talk for a few days to know each other well. I had no issues with that. We started to chat regularly on the forum. I even posted some of my recipes with the body parts of the cadavers I collected to fulfill my fantasy. With more days passing, Zoe and I became quite close, but we never shared any details regarding our personal life. We made a pact that after we are done tasting each other's blood one time, we will break all ties and move on to other possible candidates. So, after a wait of 2 months, the day finally arrived. We decided to meet at a completely unknown location. I didn't tell her my address, and she too did the same. We selected a random cafe to meet around 7 p.m. sharp. I hadn't seen her, neither had she seen me. It was going to be a weirdly fascinating experience for both of us. To resolve the issue of identification, I texted her, "How will you recognize me?" Zoe replied, "I will tie a red scarf around my hand, and you also do the same." On my way home from college, I bought a red scarf from the clothing store. I barely slept that night. I was all excited to meet this woman and make my fantasy come true. The cafe was at 20 minutes distance from my place. I got ready and took my car keys. I dropped a text on the chat box of Cannibal Cafe to notify Zoe that I am on my way. Zoe too replied back that she will get there in time, just how we discussed. I drove really fast that night and reached the cafe before time. I looked at the clock, it was 6:50 p.m. There was still 10 minutes left. I booked a table for the two of us and started to wait. I got up in the middle to go to the washroom. I took the scarf with me. While coming out of the washroom, I started to tie the scarf on my hand. Suddenly, my eyes went to the entrance. I saw a woman with a red scarf tied around her hand closing the cafe door after coming inside. Her back was facing me. I was sure that this is Zoe, with no doubt because there was no one else with a red scarf on their hand inside the cafe. I looked at my watch and it was 7 p.m. sharp. I was about to walk towards her when she finally turned towards me and my life shattered at that very moment. I was right about her name not being Zoe, because I know her name. And not just her name, I know her very well. The woman with whom I fantasized about fulfilling my cannibalistic urges on the dark web is none other than my very own mother. Yes, my mom was standing at the cafe door. Her eyes were transfixed on me. We were both standing like statues with red scarves tied to our hands. I couldn't believe all the things she told me these past 2 months. My mom, she is just like me, or I am just like her. My head was banging. I had no clue what to do. My mom stood there numb, expressionless for a few seconds, then stormed out of the cafe like lightning. It has been 4 years now. I haven't seen her, haven't talked to her. My grandparents have no idea about this, I think. I don't even know where my mom is now. Last time, when Nana called me, she said mom took a job in the UK and left this country. She asked me what went wrong with her suddenly. I obviously couldn't answer. I don't know what to do. I have deleted my account from the Cannibal Cafe forum. I haven't visited the dark web since the incident. I am trying to be a vegan now, but seriously, will I be able to face my own mother ever in life? This happened last week. I am Sam. I study in high school. We had a teacher named Mr. Smith. He taught us chemistry. One day after class, Mr. Smith told us that he is planning to go on a long holiday, which is why he might not be present at the next classes. He told us that until our principal can arrange for someone to take his class for a while, we should prepare for our lessons on our own. Generally, everyone was excited to hear that. We all thought at least the chemistry class was going to be off period for a while. Next day, when we went to school, something unexpected happened. As soon as we went in front of the classroom and opened the classroom door, everyone screamed in horror. A body was hanging from the glass ceiling. It was our chemistry teacher, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith committed suicide in his very own classroom. His neck snapped to the other side when he jumped from the wooden chair while trying to tie the rope around his neck. Many of the students fainted. Many started vomiting. I became numb. I stood there silently like a statue and watched his body dangling in the air. The school immediately went into a lockdown. Police cars stormed the front of the school. Our parents came to take us home. We stood outside the school gate and watched the paramedics taking our chemistry teacher's body away. Next day, our principal addressed the entire school by giving his condolences to Mr. Smith's family. Our school life went back to normal, but we often heard teachers and seniors talking about Mr. Smith's unfortunate death. Some even said that his wife was having an affair with one of his friends. Probably, this is why he decided to commit suicide. With more days passing by, people started to forget about this incident, but the classroom where Mr. Smith committed suicide remained unused. Needless to say, it was almost awkward for everyone to use that classroom like every other one. Our principal declared that the classroom will be renovated and turned into a lab. One day, I went to the washroom in the middle of our English class. The boys' washroom was right beside the chemistry class. I was passing through the classroom door just when an eerie feeling grabbed my heart. I felt like someone was inside the classroom. I opened the door to check myself, but there wasn't anyone. I found myself standing inside an empty classroom. Suddenly, I heard someone's voice really close to my ear. It felt like someone was standing beside me and whispered in my ear, "Help me, Sam." I immediately turned around, but there was no one. For a second, I felt as if Mr. Smith spoke into my ears. After that day, many rumors started to roam around the school. Teachers said that the chemistry classroom is haunted. Our school security guard went to take his usual round at night and saw a man standing in the dark hallway with blood-red eyes. His neck was snapped, making his head hang from it. Even though these incidents were only witnessed by some, the entire school started to believe that Mr. Smith's spirit actually roams in the school. One day, I was talking to a friend standing in the school corridor when I saw two cops leaving our principal's office. I overheard one of the cops saying to our principal, "Yeah, this is just a case of suicide, hence, we don't think further investigation is needed anymore. So, we're closing this case, Mr. Wright." Our principal, Mr. Wright, nodded his head with a sad face, and the cops left. That night, I had a terrible dream. I was standing in the chemistry classroom. Above my head, Mr. Smith's lifeless body was hanging from the ceiling. I looked up and saw his dead face. He suddenly opened his eyes and said, "You must bring him here, Sam. You must help me." As I woke up drenched in sweat, I realized it was 10 o'clock in the morning. I tried to think the entire day. Why am I having this weird feeling about Mr. Smith's death? And who was the person he was telling me to bring to him? There were so many questions, but no answers. I expected it was just my mind playing tricks on me until the next horror unfolded. Our school organized a basketball match after the last class. It was 5 p.m. when the match started. All the students and teachers stayed back after dark that day. Principal Wright was supposed to honor the winning team with the house cup. Everyone was cheering on the basketball court like crazy. Suddenly, my eyes went on Mr. Wright, and I saw his face losing color. It seemed like there wasn't a single drop of blood in his face. His eyes were fixed to the middle of the basketball court. He wasn't watching the game, rather staring at something. I followed his eyes, but saw nothing except players running around to score a point. Principal Wright suddenly got up and said something to our gym teacher, who was sitting right next to him, then left for the exit. This is when I heard that spine-chilling voice, "Bring him, Sam. Bring him to the chemistry classroom." I don't know what happened to me, but I somehow lost control over my legs for a moment. I felt someone pulled me from my seat and made me follow him. As soon as I came out, I saw Mr. Smith walking away amidst the school corridor. I said in a shaken but clear voice, "Mr. Smith, my father would like to speak with you for a moment. It is urgent." My father wasn't there. I made all this up. Trust me or not, I felt like I was in a mode of trance and someone else was speaking from my mouth. Mr. Smith got really annoyed and started to walk towards me. He said in an irritated voice, "Fine, where is he? I don't have much time. I need to go somewhere. Come, let's make it quick." I took him to the chemistry classroom. Mr. Wright went inside and said, "Why did you tell him to wait here? There are plenty of places in school to talk." The classroom was as usual, empty. Mr. Smith went inside and looked around, then said, "Where's your father? I don't see him. What kind of joke is this?" But before I could answer, the classroom door shut in my face. Mr. Wright started to scream terribly, as if there was someone else with him too. I heard him saying, "Oh my God, Smith, you are supposed to be dead." The next words that came out of his mouth were in fragments, but I could gather the idea was that he was apologizing to someone, saying that he didn't mean to pursue his wife with romantic interest and something more like that. Then he started to scream terribly. The game stopped, hearing his painful scream, and a few students came out. Everyone gathered outside the classroom. We all kept hearing Principal Wright begging for mercy to someone. Teachers tried to open the door, but nothing happened. He kept screaming for a few more minutes, and then suddenly, it all went silent. The cops were informed, and when they broke the door, we found our principal's body hanging from the ceiling in the same manner as Mr. Smith. No one could say what exactly happened that night inside the classroom. When the cops asked me, did I see anyone going inside the room with Mr. Wright, as I was the first one to reach near the classroom door, I replied, "I went to the washroom and came out hearing his scream, just like everyone else." Later, a few teachers said that Mr. Smith's wife has confessed to the cops about her affair with our school principal. This is why Mr. Smith took his life, due to depression and anxiety. But no one knows what happened to Principal Wright. They think he committed suicide out of guilt, but they don't know what I know. I think it was Mr. Smith who lured Mr. Wright using me as a medium and then took his final revenge. But one question that still confuses my mind is that, why did my chemistry teacher choose me to get his revenge? What do you think? I was 12 years old when my parents died in a plane crash. My grandpa took me in, but he was too old to care for me. My grandpa had a friend who ran a convent school in a small hill station. He decided to admit me there so that after his death, I didn't end up in a foster home or an orphanage. One Sunday morning, we got onto a train to reach the hill station. I suddenly became a quiet kid after the huge shock of my parents passing away. The convent was specifically for boys. There were hostels on the school premise. The school principal hugged me and said, "Hello, Richard. I am Father Baker. You must know, no matter where your parents are, they will always be with you. You will be taken good care of here. Think this place as your home now." My grandpa talked with him for a while and then told me, "I will come to get you for holidays. You can talk to me whenever you feel like it. Just ask Father Baker, okay?" I nodded my head, gesturing yes. I still remember my grandpa's tearful eyes when he waved me goodbye, standing at the school gate. The school was built in a valley, surrounded by hills. There was a huge playground in the middle. Honestly, it was hard for me to be on my own the first few weeks. But with time, I too adopted this new environment, like every other boy in the convent. Every hostel room had accommodations for 3 boys. My roommates, Chris and Bernard, whom we called Bernie, became good friends in no time. We were a team. They always protected me from bullies and any kind of trouble. Maybe they felt bad for me somehow, but whatever the reasons, they are the best kind of friends I earned in life. I am still in touch with them, and I will be as long as I can. Now, back to the story. Our room was faced towards a bushy field adjacent to an abandoned lake. It was the backside of our hostel. There were saplings
dude, I
and
see
broken
this
pillars
shit.
scattered all over the field. The lake water was dark and dirty. One evening,
I can't hear
we
now.
were sitting in our room and finishing our work for school tomorrow. Even though the weather was favorable, I felt a bit
Yo,
claustrophobic.
you're not watching this
I
shit?
walked up to the window, and as I went to open it, Barney rushed towards me and said,
Mine.
"What are you doing, Robert?"
Yo, watch this
I got
shit.
very
This is
surprised
fucking
with the sudden
tense.
feat of
I
excitement
got
and-
this shit modded
I
as
replied
hard and I'm
awkwardly,
fucking dying.
Opening this window. The room is feeling claustrophobic, so I thought. Chris got up and said,
Trying to fucking
"No,
survive. This shit,
you must
the zombies are
never
fucking
open this
one-tapping
window after
everybody.
dark. It's a strict rule. Rooms that have windows facing the graveyard should never be opened after dark." This was obviously some brand new information to me. Even though it has only been a week for me here, I knew almost every small detail about this convent and this place. But I never heard that we have a graveyard near our convent. With a confused face, I replied, "Where's the graveyard?
We're getting
I don't
fucked.
see any tombstones
Everything's
there."
fucking
I mean,
one-tapping this
even
bitch, yo.
yesterday morning when I opened the window, there was just
Mm-hmm.
saplings and trees growing in the field with the abandoned lake at the end. Chris went back to his seat and drank water from his glass. Barney told me in a low voice, "Sit down. We will tell you." I was more than surprised to see this sudden change in their behavior. After taking a pause for a few seconds, Chris finally started to talk. Many years back, this convent used to be a royal house of a British Navy officer. His name was Gerald Shaw. Mr. Shaw had a wife named Emily. Their only daughter, Samara, died from a brain fever. After their daughter's
Let
death,
him know, let him know.
Mr. Shaw somehow managed himself, but his wife Emily couldn't take the shock. Pinned down with sorrow and depression, she drowned herself in the lake. Next morning, one of their maids discovered Emily Shaw's body floating in the lake, lifelessly. Mr. Shaw arranged a funeral for his beloved wife. They buried her in the church graveyard, but next morning, everyone witnessed a terrible incident. They saw her grave had been dug up, and her coffin lying over the ground as if someone took it out from the grave. Thinking it a weird incident, they all buried her again. But the same thing happened 3 times consecutively. Every time they buried her, the coffin came out from the ground on its own. The church father then told Mr. Shaw that his wife was a sinner. As she had committed suicide, which is an offense in Christianity, the Holy Church graveyard is refusing to accept her body. Out of rage and disgust, Mr. Shaw took his wife's body and buried her in that field, which was then the garden of the house. Since then, people say Emily Shaw's spirit roams that place at night, and if anyone sees her, she tries to get their soul by killing that person. She is still buried there, and her tombstone is probably covered in weed and saplings, hiding from the sunlight. I said, "And how much of this story is actually true?" Bernie looked at me and replied, "Last year, a boy from room 707 fell asleep keeping the window open the entire night. He was alone in the room as his roommates went home for the holidays. Next day, when everyone went to call him for prayer, he was found dead. His eyes were turned to the other side, with his tongue coming out of his mouth. It was as if someone choked him to death in his sleep." Old places like this always come up with a bizarre story from its past. I got back to my homework saying, "Well, once you die, you are dead. This is the truth of life. Otherwise, my parents would have come back to me long back." Obviously, a comment like this silenced both Chris and Bernie that night. But with time, I realized how the entire school blindly trusts this story about the Shaw family. There were many rooms with windows facing the graveyard, so it was almost impossible to lock all those rooms. It even surprised me how each boy in our school solely believes this story and never breaks the rule by opening their room windows after dark. Even boys with windows facing other sides of the valley were scared to open them after sundown. I had no intention to make a fuss about all this because I hardly believed the story, and also, at the same time, it didn't bother me. So be it. I never cared about whether the window was open or closed. Holidays came and we all got ready to go home. We were packing our bags when our cleaning lady, Miss Bright, came in. She said in her caring nanny voice, "My children are ready to go home, it seems. Who will miss poor Miss Bright now?" We smiled and said, "We will be back soon and everyone will miss her." She was really caring towards all of us. She started to clean the room before holidays and we again got busy packing. Miss Bright opened the window and sunlight flooded inside the room. I went near the window and stood there silently, watching the black lake and the bushy field. Chris called me and said, "Let's go, Robert. Your grandpa is waiting downstairs." We left for home. It was a 1-month holiday. I stayed with my grandpa and had a lot of fun. My grandpa told me that my parents have left enough money for me so I don't have to worry about my higher studies and life ahead. I looked at him and said, "Grandpa, do you believe people can come back even after death?" He obviously didn't expect such a question, that too from me. So he looked at me with surprised eyes, then said, "Well, they don't have to come back if they stay in your heart. Like your parents, they never left you. They are still with you." I was expecting an answer like that, so I didn't extend the conversation. After the holidays, we returned to our school. Chris and I were downstairs saying goodbye to my grandpa, while Bernie went up to unlock our room. The school allowed us to carry our own room key. As soon as he opened our hostel room, I heard a scream. We immediately ran to our room and saw Bernie lying unconscious on the floor. But there was so much more happening other than that. The room was completely ransacked, as if someone took out their frustration on each and every piece of furniture inside the room. Not just that, there were bloody footprints all over the room floor, and the window was wide open. It later came out that Miss Bright forgot to close the window, but I was not ready to accept this explanation that some woman's ghost did this to our room. Miss Bright got suspended for a few weeks for her careless behavior. Bernie got admitted to the local hospital, and Chris went to stay with him that night. The excessive seriousness of the situation made me adamant to check out how much this ghost story was true. I was so angry with Miss Bright getting suspended over such a small incident that I made up my mind that night. After dinner, I came back to my room and opened the window. It was 8 o'clock. A cool breeze came in. The abandoned backside and lake stood still. The sounds of crickets chirping made the atmosphere spooky and mysterious. I went back to my bed and said to myself, let's see if you really exist, Emily. I don't remember what time it was, but I woke up hearing heavy breathing. As I slowly opened my eyes and looked around the dark room filled with pale moonlight, I didn't see anything at first. But then, all of a sudden, my eyes went to the window, and what I saw made me shiver. There was a woman figure leaning on the window. She was grabbing the iron bars of the window, and her mouth was wide open. I have never seen such a vicious face. Her mouth was so wide that I could see her uvula inside her mouth. She kept staring at me and then tried to come inside the room. As soon as she stretched her big, skinny hand, I felt a soft touch at the back of my neck. I looked back and saw my mom was standing there. She looked like a reflection. She then said in a low voice, "Robbie, get up, switch on the lights." I don't know from where I got the courage at the time. I jumped from my bed and switched on the lights. I saw no one at the window. Just the dark lake stood outside. I shut the window immediately, and that night, I stayed with another classmate. I spoke to no one about this except to my friends Chris and Bernie. Bernie and Chris said, my mom loves me so much that she actually came to save my life that night. After all, love surpasses all evil in this world. I cried hearing this, but their words gave me hope and positivity. I don't care if you believe my story, but I am happy that my parents are still watching my back from wherever they are now. I finished my schooling there last year, but as long as I stayed in the convent, none of us ever opened the window again.
I'm a 28-year-old single mom. My son Ricky is still studying in preschool. We live in a suburb of Southern California. My husband was an alcoholic. It goes without saying that our marriage was failing. He often abused me, but for the sake of my son, I kept tolerating him. One night he came home really drunk and started breaking furniture out of a rage over a petty fight. Ricky woke up and heard the sounds and came out of his room. He was standing in the middle of the dining room and watching his abusive drunk father creating a huge scene. I was expecting it to be like all the usual nights, just when something horrible happened. My husband Marcus threw a vase toward the wall, but instead it hit my poor Ricky in the head. He started bleeding and fell to the floor being unconscious. I immediately rushed him to the hospital and eventually split up from my husband. I mean, that was all I could take. After reporting to 911, the cops arrested him and he was put in jail. I visited him 2 or 3 times in jail where he pleaded to me to bring Ricky to see him, but I obviously never did. He apologized many times and said it was the alcohol that turned him into a different person, but I was out of second chances for him. Maybe my life wasn't problematic enough, because last month in January I received horrible news that my husband killed himself inside the prison cell. He somehow managed to sneak a fork with him after dinner, then stabbed himself in the neck. Even though I was fed up with him, I still couldn't help but feel sorry for him. I accepted my fate and decided to move on with my life until this unbelievable incident happened. Last week, I finally told my son about his father's death. Ricky broke into tears even though his father never treated us right. I couldn't help but cry with him too. We were getting back on our feet until one evening my neighbor Miss Stewart came over to our house. Ricky was watching TV in the living room when the doorbell rang. As I opened the door, Miss Stewart greeted me with her homemade pie and said, "Hi, Elena. I hope you are doing well. I am really sorry to hear about your husband. How's your son?" I accepted her gift and replied, "Thank you, Miss Stewart. We are trying our best to get on with our lives." She smiled and said, "I know, Elena, you have been through a lot, which is why out of courtesy I came to invite you at our small party that's going to take place in the town hall on Valentine's Day night. I'm not going to pressure you, but if you decide to come, we will all be very happy to have you there." I smiled and said, "I will try if I can." That night when I was tucking Ricky into his bed, he asked, "Mom, now that Dad is dead, are you going to celebrate Valentine's Day without him?" I was shocked to hear such words come from a 5-year-old. I said, "Why would you say something like that, Ricky?" Ricky looked at me blankly for a few seconds, then answered, "Dad told me to ask you. He would be sad if you do so." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I said in a shaken voice, "What, Ricky? You know Dad is no longer with us. Please stop saying things like that." Ricky didn't say anything, just turned to the right side and closed his eyes. I couldn't sleep that entire night. There was no way Ricky would have come up with such a question on his own. Next morning, I called my mom and told her everything. She calmed me down and said kids make up things like that when they lose someone at a very young age. Probably Ricky misses his dad, so he is worried that if I start dating again, I will find someone to replace his dad. I went to work after dropping Ricky at school. Around the afternoon, I was going through some important files when my phone rang. I saw it was Ricky's teacher. She called me and said to come to the school immediately. Without thinking much, I rushed to the preschool. As I stormed into the school hallway, I saw Ricky sitting on a bench beside his teacher. He looked all pale and freaked out. I could tell just by the look on his face that something scared him terribly. He ran to me crying and I wrapped him into my arms. His teacher told me Ricky went to the bathroom during class, but when he didn't come back after a while, she went to look for him and saw him sitting on the bathroom floor hiding his face onto his palms and crying. He is not speaking a single word about what happened in the bathroom. I brought Ricky home and cooked him dinner. I decided to make him sleep with me that night. As I lay beside him, I kissed his forehead and asked, "What happened at school today, Ricky? Did anyone bully you?" He looked at me with his trembling eyes and said, "I don't want to see Daddy ever again, Mom." I don't know if you'll believe me or not, but my stomach dropped right at that moment. I said in a low, scared voice, "What do you mean by that, Ricky?" Ricky replied in a sobbing voice, "I was coming out of the bathroom just when I saw Daddy standing near the door. His face was all scary and his head was stuck. He wasn't blinking, just staring at me." I took a pause and said, "Why do you say his head was stuck?" Ricky replied, "His head was tilted and he couldn't move it. Just kept standing there and watching me." Then he completely broke into tears. I remained awake that night. The horrifying things my son just said took my sleep away. The next day was Valentine's Day. I was already worried about the entire life situation, but somehow to cheer Ricky up, I decided to take him to the mall. The city mall was decorated in big red hearts and Cupid statues were all over the mall floors. Couples were walking around hand in hand. Amidst all that celebration, Ricky and I somehow forgot all the tensions. We played games in the gaming zone, had ice cream. I got myself new clothes and bought Ricky a bicycle. I decided to spend that night with my parents because deep down somewhere I was feeling lonely. After all, it was Valentine's Day. Around 8, we got into the car to drive to my parents' house. I was relieved to think that for one night, I will be able to sleep peacefully. My parents live in the outskirt area, so we got onto the long empty highway after passing through the city. My mom called in between and I told her we would be there in 15 to 20 minutes max. Ricky was laughing and I was feeling good to see him all happy. The road had very few cars and it was quite a safe drive for us. Ricky said, "Mom, can I play some video games on your phone till we reach Nana's house?" I replied, "Of course you can, my baby." As I leaned to the right side to get the phone out of my pants pocket, Ricky screamed in fear, saying, "Look, Mom, look, it's Daddy!" I pressed the brake so hard that a huge creaking sound took place. What happened next, I will never be able to forget my entire life. The car headlights were making the road ahead clearly visible, but a person was standing in the middle of the road close to my car. I don't know how I should put it, but that wasn't just any normal person. It was my dead husband. Yes, Marcus was standing in front of my car. He was staring at Ricky with the blank, expressionless eyes. His face was so pale that it seemed there was no blood left in his veins. And above it all, I realized Ricky told me the truth that day. Marcus was standing there with a tilted head. His neck had stab wounds on its right side. Due to the broken bones, his head was tilted on the left. I could see dried up blood all over his dress and partial face. He then suddenly looked at me and smiled. I've never seen such a demonic smile. I could tell it was his haunting spirit obstructing our way. I had no idea what I should be doing. Ricky and I were both frozen like ice. We were breathing heavily. Marcus walked close to the car in that gruesome appearance and then said in a growling voice,
"I hope you forgive me, Elena. I love my son too. Take care, you two."
He then turned around and started to walk away. I could see him starting to disappear in the air as if he was made of dust particles. But before vanishing completely into the air, he turned toward me for one last time and said,
"Happy Valentine's Day."
I don't know how I reached my parents' house that night. If possible, I would like to forget this night ever happened, but I don't think I'll ever be able to. I just hope this gruesome memory fades away from Ricky's mind once he grows up.
The app TikTok rose to fame in a very short span of time. I was studying in high school when the app gained huge popularity among teenagers. On a bright summer day, I went to the beach with my friends Lily and Mindy. We were having a good time when Mindy said, "Let's take some TikTok videos and post them." I have never been a social media freak, but it was our day out. Before I could say any more, I saw Lily and Mindy making videos on TikTok. They were lip syncing to a song, and then they moved the camera towards me. As I said, I get awkward about such things, so I just smiled and waved on the video. We had a nice time on the beach and came back. At night, Mindy texted me and said that she has posted our videos on the beach on TikTok today. I texted her back saying, "Come on, I don't care. I'm just glad we all had a nice time." That ended on a perfect note. The next day when I reached school, I saw Lily and Mindy standing in the hallway and laughing out loud. I joined them too. Lily said in an excited voice, "Our videos are getting a lot of views. You know what? Sam called me last night and praised my looks." Mindy started laughing and said, "Guess you were getting dates because of TikTok now." We all laughed about this and went to the class. Professor McGuire was teaching our history class. I was sitting right next to Lily, and Mindy was sitting in front of me. The class was going on its own when suddenly Lily poked me. I looked at her and said in a low voice, "What?" Lily gestured me to check my phone. I looked at my phone and saw she has text in our WhatsApp group. Lily wrote, "Meet me at the bathroom now." Mindy and I thought it might be some emergency issue. As soon as Lily left the class, we got up and left too. After reaching the girls' bathroom, I saw Lily standing in the bathroom with a really freaked out face. Mindy asked, "What's going on, Lily?" She said in a tensed voice, "Do you remember the TikTok video we took at the beach, 3 of us in it?" I replied, "Yeah, what about it?" She said, "I just got a very bizarre comment on that video." Lily showed us the video. Mindy and I went to the comment box and saw some guy named Mike the Hunter has commented, "Saw you girls that day at the beach. Might come to meet you again." The comment indeed creeped us out. Mindy said in a worried voice, "Did any of you notice any creepy dude at the beach that day?" I said, "No, I didn't. Also, there were so many people, it would have been really hard to spot a single person like that." Lily agreed with me, and we deleted the comment from the video. We calmed ourselves down and decided to ignore this matter. It was also possible that someone is deliberately trying to scare us by lying. After coming back home, I started to keep an eye on our TikTok beach video in case the guy comments again. I expected the matter to end here, but that obviously didn't happen. I was sleeping in my room. It was around midnight when I woke up with the heavy sound of notifications popping in my phone. At first, it felt really crazy that who is sending notifications at this hour of the night? I checked my phone and saw 7 recent comments on our TikTok video. I opened the video right then and saw the same guy named Mike the Hunter has commented again. His comments were even scarier this time. Okay, whose idea was it to delete my comment? Come on, be a good girl and tell me. After 4 to 5 comments like this where he accused us of deleting his comment from our video, I noticed his last comment and a spine-chilling feeling grabbed my heart. Mike has written, "I could have abducted one of you when you were coming from school today, but I didn't. Do you really guys think it will be a good idea to push me?" I called Mindy, and she took Lily in a conference call. Lily was already sobbing over the phone. Mindy said in a panicked voice, "What should we do, Pamela? This guy is stalking us." I knew both of them were very much terrified, so I have to keep my head calm right now. I told in a firm voice, "Guys, it's a weekday, and it isn't much hard to guess that we're school-going teenagers. This guy is just trying to scare us by making basic guesses." Lily replied, "Well, there's hardly any info in his account. I think this can be a fake account too. Maybe someone is trying to prank us from school." I commented in the video mentioning the guy. "Fuck off, you creepy jerk. What we do is none of your business." I then told Lily to block his account immediately. Lily did that, and we all went to bed. A few days went by and nothing happened. We almost forgot about this guy and got back to our usual life. One day, I was coming out of my class when I saw Lily talking to Sam standing in the hallway. Mindy was right behind me. I gestured her towards Lily, and we both laughed. Lily was blushing as Sam kept flirting with her. Mindy said in a sarcastic voice, "At least something good happened to Lily because of that bloody TikTok." We came back to school, in our usual happy mood. But something changed after that day. Mindy stopped coming to school. I called her house and her mother picked up the phone. She told me that Mindy is not well and she's going under diagnosis. It might take a while for her to come back to school. There's nothing much Lily and I could do, so we went on with our regular life. Lily started dating Mike, and I kind of felt alone without Mindy. I was sitting in the cafeteria alone when Lily came to me and said, "Did you get any text from Mindy?" I replied, "Yeah, I talked to her a few days back. She says she's undergoing some therapy. She asked about you. I told her how hugely busy you are with your new boyfriend." Lily smirked and said, "Come on, stop teasing me now." I smiled and said, "When was the last time you talked to Mindy?" Lily replied, "Actually, in the morning she only texted me. She told me she is feeling a bit better and would like to see me in the evening near the jungle gym at the park." I felt a bit sad that Mindy only invited Lily and forgot me. Lily didn't care much about that, which hurt me more. But I let the matter slide and smiled anyway. I returned home after school. I was going through my study table when I found Mindy's copy in my books. I remembered she forgot her copy the last day she came to school, so I picked it up to return it later. As I opened the copy and noticed the first page, my head started to bang in terror. The copy was filled with scribbles and obscene words. Mindy has written Lily and Sam's name all over the copy and has violently scribbled Lily's name. When I turned to the last page, the actual horror unfolded in front of my eyes. There was a name written on the last page, Mike, the Hunter. So it was Mindy. She made all those creepy comments in our video? But why? Then a thought struck my mind. Did Mindy have a crush on Sam? Is this all because of that? I called Mindy's mom immediately. I asked her what is going on with Mindy. But before I could say more, Mindy's mom broke into tears. She said on the phone, "Oh, Pamela, how should I tell you this? Mindy has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Since you all came back from the beach, her behavior started to turn even more violent. She would lock herself in the room all day and scream and break things. We have sent her to the mental institution nearby. I don't know what more to do." A terrifying realization came to my mind. Mindy has told Lily to meet her at 7 p.m. at the park. Without wasting any more time, I told Mindy's mom, "Miss Smith, I want you to call the mental institution right now and tell them to keep a strict eye on Mindy." She wanted to ask me why, but I just told her to do this immediately. After disconnecting the phone with Mindy's mom, I started to call Lily, but her call was going straight to her voicemail. I started to grab my things to leave for the park. On my way to the park, Mindy's mom called me again and gave me the shocking news, which I was expecting somehow. She said that Mindy has escaped from the institution. The hospital staff has said that she was being extremely violent the entire day. I told her how Mindy is trying to harm Lily over her obsession with a guy at school. I also told her to call the cops and meet us at the park where Mindy is going to meet Lily. It took me 5 minutes more to reach the park. As soon as I got near the jungle gym, I saw the scariest sight of my life. Lily was lying on the ground, and Mindy was choking her to death. This is not the Mindy I used to know. Her face was filled with scratches of nails. Her hair was all messed up. Her eyes were extremely wide and full of hate and anger. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Mindy, that is your friend Lily. What are you doing?" Mindy looked at me and said in a deep, dark voice, "Who's Mindy? I have murdered your friend Mindy already. Now, I'm going to finish this skinny bitch too. And after that, it will be your turn." Then she started to laugh with her evil-looking face. By this time, Lily grabbed sand from the ground and threw it into Mindy's eyes. Mindy started to scream, holding her eyes, and I helped Lily to get up. The cops and Mindy's parents had already reached the spot. They all grabbed Mindy and took her away. I don't know where she is now. I have left the town long back. Lily and Sam are married now and living happily in New York. I myself am someone's wife too. Mindy's family kept no contact with us. They disappeared without letting anyone know about them after that incident. But Mindy, if you are in good shape and watching this, please get back to us. We still miss our old friend.
My name is Sophie, and this happened last year on Valentine's Day. I met Sam 6 months before Valentine's Day. Even though it all started out as casual dating, we soon became really close. I felt like he is the one for me. We used to go out a lot and made many good memories. Everything was going well. One day, Sam told me he recently spoke to his mother. She would like to invite us to a Valentine's Day dinner at their house. I looked at him with a nervous face and said, are you sure about bringing me to meet your family? Sam gave a big smile and said, come on, Sophie, you're a delight. They will be overwhelmed to meet my girl. Even though I felt things were happening soon, I didn't say that to Sam. Honestly, I was excited to meet his family too. His family stayed in a farmhouse located in the countryside. I stayed with Sam on the night before Valentine's Day. At midnight, when the clock struck 12, Sam surprised me with a bunch of roses and a beautiful heart-shaped red velvet cake. Sam loved pampering me. We exchanged our Valentine's gifts, and love was indeed in the air. Next morning, we woke up and packed our belongings. It was going to be a 5-hour drive, so we decided to start early. Sam started the car, and we were on our way. As soon as we left the city, we stepped into a refreshing nature. Long trees standing on the roadsides and a bright sky greeted us with a cool breeze, cheered me up in no time. We were laughing and talking on the way. I asked Sam, so how many people are there in your family? Sam smiled and said, you're still nervous about this, huh? I awkwardly smiled because I was at the time. Sam then said, well, it's not too much. My parents, my grandma, and my little sister Tina. I replied in a surprised voice, Sam, you have a sister? Why didn't you tell me earlier? How old is she? Sam smiled and said, yes, I have a sister. I knew someday you were going to meet her anyway, and she's 12 years old. I laughed at his humor. I noticed that I actually knew nothing about Sam's past or family until now. We always talked about us, but hardly talked about him or his previous life. All I know is Sam teaches in a city school, and we meet in a pub. I shrugged off this uncertain feeling because I am anyway going to meet his family now. We were about to reach when Sam's mom called. I obviously couldn't hear her from the other side of the phone, but with Sam's reply, I guessed that she was also excited to meet us. After 4.5 hours of driving, Sam pointed out to a dusty road on our left and said, see that road? The farmhouse is at the end of it. We got on the road and I was surprised to see how an entire family is managing their life in such a secluded area. As far as my eyes went, I could see only trees and vast fields. At the end of the road stood a wooden farmhouse acquiring a large area. We finally reached near the house and Sam honked his horn. A small girl dressed in flower-printed frock came running towards Sam. Behind her, a woman came too with a smile on her face. I realized it was Sam's mother, and the little girl is his sister. She hugged Sam and said, welcome home, son, and she must be the beautiful Sophie, and came to hug me too. I felt her affection with her warm hug, and my face turned all red with this unexpected attention. She said in a gentle voice, come on, let's go inside. Everyone is waiting for you two. It was a warm, beautiful house. The house had a lake in the backside. I have never been to a place so close to nature. Hence, everything felt amazing to me. Sam's mom took us to the dining room. An old woman was sitting in a big armchair, and a tall man was pouring himself a glass of wine. Sam's mom introduced me to all of them. Sam rushed to the old woman and said, oh, Grandma, I missed you so much. His grandma smiled and then looked at me. There was something in her stare that made me feel really uncomfortable. She was not just staring at me, rather checking me out. Her big wide eyes crept me a bit. Suddenly, the tall man came to me and said, hi, I'm William, Sam's father. Welcome, Sophie. I smiled and said, the pleasure is all mine, sir. Thank you for having me here. Sam's grandma laughed with a creepy voice and said, well, none's gonna have you. We've already cooked food, dear. Everyone laughed at her joke, and I had to join them despite the joke being really not funny. Sam's mom said, we have prepared your bed in Tina's room. I hope you won't mind sharing a room with her. I nodded my head and said, oh no, it's absolutely fine. Sam's mom then turned to the little girl and said, Tina, take Sophie to your room and be nice to her, okay? Tina chuckled and said, I'm always nice, Mama. Tina held my hand and we walked upstairs. As soon as I entered her room, I got shocked. Her room was nothing like a little girl's room. There were stuffed animals all over. Rabbits, eagles, deer heads were hanging from here and there. I asked her, whoa, what are these, Tina? She replied in a jolly voice, these are mementos. I said in a worried voice, What do you mean, by mementos? She chuckled and said, Daddy and I like to go hunting every Sunday. These are all the animals we killed, and I stuffed them with Daddy's help. Don't you like my collection? I was out of words. Suddenly, I hear Sam's voice from behind. Looks like you guys are already bonding, huh? He stood on the doorstep and smiled. I was surprised to see how casual he was to see his little sister decorating her room with dead animals instead of toys. Tina chuckled and said, I will go check out the frosting of my strawberry cake. Mommy and I made that for you, Sophie. Brother told us you like strawberry. She ran out of the room. Sam came to me and said, Hey, is everything fine? I know we couldn't stay together. My family is, a bit conservative on that front. I replied, No, that's fine, but don't you think your sister's room decoration is a bit weird? Sam laughed and said, Oh, Sophie, I forgot to tell you. Our family has a kick for hunting, you know? We have grown up amidst lots of dead animals. It's nothing. You'll get used to it, too. Now go freshen up. Dinner will be served soon. Around 8:30, I got downstairs with Tina for dinner. The dinner table was filled with various kinds of meat dishes. As we all sat down and started to eat, my mind started to forget all the tensions earlier. They were a happy family after all. The steak was delicious. The chicken soup made with their farm-fresh vegetables took all my tiredness away. Tina said in a cheerful voice, Cut the cake, Mommy. Give Sophie the big piece. Sam's sister was really adorable. In one word, I was having a really good time. Sam came to kiss me goodnight. We were just talking when I heard Sam's father's voice from downstairs. Come on, Sam, hurry up. It's time now. I asked, Time for what, Sam? Sam replied, My father and I are going to hunt some wild boar tonight. There's a forest about 20 minutes from our house. Anyways, gotta go, love. See you in the morning. I saw Sam and his father driving away in their van from Tina's window. I was surprised to know Sam could be the guy who likes to hunt wild boars at night. I mean, he appeared very simple to me. I lied down on my bed. Tina was asleep already. Don't exactly remember what time it was, but I heard a woman scream and woke up in fear. It took some time to adjust my eyes with the darkness of the room, and I saw Tina was not in her bed. I was almost ready to get up and look for her just when I turned to my left and got freaked out like hell. Tina was standing just beside my bed. I said in a terrified voice, What was that? And what are you doing here? Tina replied in a perfectly calm voice, Don't be so scared, Sophie. It was just a pig's cry. I replied in a shaken voice, Pig? What pig? I don't think it was a pig. Tina sat down beside me and said, Yeah, the animals scream when Daddy skins them. It's absolutely fine. Words like that coming from a 12-year-old not only felt bizarre, but pointed out the fact that their entire family is hiding a secret. I decided to check things out on my own, so I acted normal and went back to bed. I waited for Tina to fall asleep again. As soon as I heard her quiet breathing, I tiptoed to the corridor. I saw the light in their woodshed from the window downstairs. Everyone was asleep. I slowly opened the door and started to walk toward the woodshed. The soft grass on the ground helped me to suppress the sound of my footsteps. The door of the woodshed was locked, but I could hear sounds of chopping and Sam's father laughing in excitement. I crouched on the ground and put my eye on the door lock. What I saw ran shivers down my spine. A woman was laying on a huge wooden table. She looked like a hiker, and she was dead. Her eyes were open like a dead fish, blood dripping from her face and hand. I couldn't see anymore because someone stood in front of the lock and my view got guarded. But I heard Sam's father say, 2 to 3 groups are residing in the forest who came for camping. Tomorrow we will hunt a male. Your mother wanted to make the steak again. Sam laughed and said, Yeah, Dad, who could tell today's steak was cut out from a man's thigh? I mean, it tasted delicious. I couldn't believe my ears and eyes. These people are cannibals. Oh my God, what do I do now? I quickly got up, and while turning towards the house, I kind of leaned into the door and made a sound. Sam said, Dad, there's someone outside the door. But by the time they opened the door, I was already inside. I peeped from the dining window and saw Sam looking around for some time, and then again went inside. I heaved a sigh of relief. I realized this is my only chance. I rushed to his room and took the car keys. I was about to go to the main door when I saw Sam's grandma standing near the door blocking my way. She gave me a vicious smile and said, You can't leave! You are supposed to be one of us now! My grandson wants to marry you so you can stay with us forever. I said in a disgusted voice. You guys are sick. Feasting on human flesh? You are all fucking cannibals. Leave me alone and let me go. But she obviously didn't listen to me. She started to scream, and I knew she was going to wake everyone up. I rushed toward her and knocked her down with one punch. She fell on the floor, and I ran for my life. I jumped into the car and saw the house lights were on. I didn't look back for a second, just started the car and drove as fast as I could. I reported to the cops about this family, but they only found a burnt-down house on the same address I gave them. I don't know where they all went, but I'm sure they have escaped suspecting I would go to the cops. I just hope I never meet any of them again. Not even that cannibal little girl.
Hi, my name is Jack. I stay in Ohio with my brother. My brother and I have a knack for car racing. Since childhood, we have been highly active in outdoor sports. Last month, we went to the racing track and took part in an ongoing competition. My brother acquired the second place, and I, on the other hand, met a terrible accident. I was fortunate enough to live through it, but there's one thing my family doesn't know till now. I don't think I will ever share this matter with them, but I feel like I need to tell someone. So, here I am with my utterly disturbing story. In that accident, I injured my arm badly. I got a few bruises and cuts all over my body. Along with all this, I hit my head really hard, resulting in immense bleeding. My brother rushed me into the hospital nearby, and we had no time to get back to the city. The IMR racing track was situated in a hill area. Hence, there was only one hospital, the Fine Rest Hospital. Don't know why the name of the hospital still feels weird to me. My brother admitted me there and took a room in a hotel nearby so that he can stay with me until the recovery. The hospital was in the foothill of a mountain. The cabin I was kept in had a really nice view from its window. After 2 days of critical condition, I finally became stable. I had no idea what was happening around me because I was heavily sedated and in terrible pain. Whatever I just explained so far, I heard most of it from my brother. On the third day of my stay at the hospital, I woke up from my unconscious state in the middle of the night. As I opened my eyes in the middle of the night, I found myself lying on a bed with an oxygen mask, saline tubes, and God knows how many channels attached to my body. I took a few minutes to understand the room properly. I looked around and saw a middle-aged woman sitting on the couch in the cabin. From her getting up, I could tell she was a nurse. She was reading something sitting there. I said in a weak voice, "Water? Some water, please?" The woman kept the magazine on the couch and walked towards me. I finally saw her face as she leaned on me. The woman was probably in her late 40s. She was wearing extreme makeup, which kind of freaked me out in my moment of trance. She then said in a high-pitched voice, "Welcome back," then slowly lifted my head and helped me drink water from the glass. Before I could talk further, I again fainted. The next morning, when I woke up, I felt much better. I saw my brother Charlie sitting next to my bed with a smiling face. He said with joyful eyes, "I thought I lost you this time," and held my hand. I smiled back at him and said, "You are not getting rid of me so easily, slugger." We both shared a laugh. He told me how our parents are freaking out and sitting at home. Dad wanted to come, but Charlie told him to calm down and he'd handle the entire situation all by himself. We were chatting and cracking jokes when a doctor and a nurse entered our room. The doctor said, "So, Mr. Benz, you are a fighter. Your brother is just like you. He arranged everything and gave us full cooperation. He is the one who actually saved you." I was feeling really lucky at that moment when my eyes went to the nurse standing in the corner. She wasn't the one from last night. My brother stood up and left with the doctor. He told me that within 4 to 5 days, they will be able to shift me to the hospital close to my house. I was lying in bed thinking about everything I went through so far when the nurse came to me and started to change my saline. I said in a feeble voice, "Can you please thank the nurse from last night? She helped me, but I was so weak that couldn't thank her." The nurse looked at me with a confused face and said, "Okay. Actually, It's tough to identify without knowing their names. If you could tell me her name, I will surely pay your regards to her. I forgot to ask her name last night, so I felt really awkward. The day nurse fed me the lunch and left. I slept for some time more. When I opened my eyes and noticed the sky from the window, I realized I slept through the entire evening. I looked at the clock and saw it was 8 p.m. I was thinking to call someone when I heard a familiar voice. As I looked at the cabin door, I saw the nurse from last night standing there and smiling at me. Her vividly painted red lips made her look really creepy. But she said, "How are you feeling today, Jack?" I smiled and said, "Better. Sorry I forgot to thank you last night for helping me with the water." She didn't let me finish my sentence and said, "It's our job. What is there to think about?" She then slowly walked into my room and sat on the couch. She picked up a magazine and started to read it, just like last night. I kept lying there without saying anything more. After a while, another nurse entered the room. The nurse started to arrange my bed and put a table on it. She then looked at me and said, "It's dinner time now." The second nurse kept working on her own while the night nurse sat on the couch quietly and read her magazine. I guess that she is probably the head nurse, and thus she visits the patients to see if they are being taken care of or not. Without any single doubt, the arrangements and treatment of the hospital felt really nice to me. I had my dinner, and all this time, none of the nurses spoke a single word to each other. One of the junior nurses left the room. I asked, "What's your name, ma'am?" This time, the nurse put down the magazine and looked at me. She smiled at me and I noticed her crooked tooth. She replied, "Everyone calls me Nurse Belford." She then got up and left the room. Her behavior felt a bit odd to me because she just used to come to my cabin and sit there. Many times at night, I woke up from my sleep and saw her sitting on the couch watching me. Whenever our eyes met, she used to smile in a very creepy way. One morning, the junior nurse came with my breakfast. I told her, "How come Nurse Belford never visits me during the daytime?" The nurse spilled the juice on the food tray as if I have asked something terrifying. She then looked at me and I noticed drops of sweat on her forehead. She said in a low voice, "How do you know about Nurse Belford?" I replied in a confused voice, because she comes to visit me almost every night. I just felt a bit weird that she never comes during the daytime, hence I asked. The nurse asked me, "You mean you actually saw her inside your room?" I replied in an irritated tone, "Of course. What kind of question is that? She was here when you came with dinner last night. Didn't you see her sitting on the couch?" The nurse got all freaked out and said, "Listen to me very carefully. This is your last night at this hospital. You must do as I say. If Nurse Belford comes to visit tonight and asks you to go with her somewhere, you must not get out of this bed. Just call any of us, or rather scream, but don't go with her." I got completely freaked out with whatever she just told me. I said in a worried voice, "What? What is this all about?" The nurse then replied in a scared voice, "Nurse Belford committed suicide last year in this hospital. Some of us still see her roaming around the corridors at night. Previously, she sometimes walks up to a young male patient and asks them to come with her. We have found 3 dead patients whose deaths were not natural at all. People say she had an affair with a man less than her age. The man eventually broke her heart, and since then, her haunting spirit tries to take revenge on young men who come here." My head was throbbing in pain. I couldn't believe all this time I was talking to a dead person. I didn't know what to do. I can't leave this hospital before morning. I have already put everyone in enough trouble, so I decided to sleep through the entire night. The nurse stayed with me till midnight, but she had 2 other patients to attend as it was a small hospital. She left and told me to lay on my bed and to keep my eyes closed. I kinda dozed off, but around 3 a.m., I heard a squeaky voice calling my name. "Jack, open your eyes, Jack. I have a surprise for you." Goosebumps appeared on my skin. My heart started to beat like a wild horse. I didn't open my eyes. I realized it was Nurse Belford, but I still didn't react. Then I heard footsteps going out of the room. After lying on the bed like that for a few more seconds, I finally opened my eyes. The room was dark, but the moonlight from the window gave a clear view. There was no one in my room. I heaved a sigh of relief and turned to the left side of my bed, thinking, finally, it's all over now. As soon as my head turned to the left, I saw Nurse Belford placing her head on my bed and staring at me with angry, evil eyes. Her face was looking fucking scary. Blood was dripping from her red lips. Her eyes were so big that it could see into my soul. She then said, in a horrifying voice, "You think you can ignore me like that? I was the one who took care of you, and now this is how you treat me?" She then opened her mouth, and clouds of black flies came out of it. The sound of those flies made my ears numb. I felt like these flies were going to choke me and I won't live to see the sun in the morning. I screamed as loud as possible. The doctor and the junior nurse rushed into my room and switched on the cabin light. The doctor thought I had some kind of panic attack. The nurse stayed in my room till morning. When my brother came, I didn't speak a single word to him. I came back to my house that day. But even still now, when I close my eyes, I feel scared thinking, what if I see Nurse Belford sitting beside my bed? Riley started late from her friend's house. Her feet stumbled as she walked on the sidewalks. She went to attend a party and got really drunk. The streetlight stood on the empty roads. There was no one around her. Her house is still 30 minutes away from here. She somehow stopped under a streetlight and decided to book an Uber for a safe journey home. With gloomy eyes and hazy vision, she booked a cab. The cab number read 2009. Riley waited for a few minutes. She looked around her. The wind and the silence of the night spooked her a bit. She thought to herself, I should have listened to Casey. It was a bad idea to leave for home tonight. All kinds of tense thoughts were going through her mind when a pair of headlights appeared from the end of the road. A white-colored Uber kept coming towards her. Riley immediately gestured with her hand, and the Uber stopped right in front of her. She was so drunk that the bright headlights of the car made her vision even more blurry. She saw the number, 200. Oh, yes, this is it, and got into the cab. The cab driver looked at the rearview mirror and said, "Where will you go?" Riley replied, 21 IMR Street. Just drive faster. The driver had a weird smile on his face. He started the car and replied, "As you wish." Riley closed her eyes and sat for a few minutes. She started to feel a bit fine. As she opened her eyes, she saw they weren't on the highway anymore. The car is now going through an old dusty road. She got a bit tensed and said, "Hey, which road is this?" The car driver smiled and said, "I took a shortcut, madam. Don't worry." Riley checked the GPS, and there was indeed a connecting road at some distance from this one. The driver started to chat with her. "So, you live alone, huh?" the driver said. Riley replied, "Yeah." She was trying to keep the conversation as short as possible, but it seemed like the driver was hitting on her. The driver then said something which ran a shiver down her spine. "You know, a beautiful girl like you should not roam in the streets at night all by herself. Haven't you heard of the incidents that are happening these days?" Riley suddenly remembered what her friend Sarah told her at the party. They were all sitting on the couch and having drinks when Sarah said, "Have you guys heard about the slit-throat killer?" Everyone got surprised, including Riley. Sarah went on saying that for the last couple of days, Atlanta cops have said to have discovered 3 bodies from the highways. It seemed like someone slit their throats and dumped their bodies in the bushes on the high road. The cops have no idea who did this, but they are suspecting that there might be a serial killer roaming the streets at night, luring people into traps and slicing their throats. All 3 bodies were found on abandoned, empty roads, pointing out that when they were killed, there wasn't anyone around the area. Riley got all tensed and immediately got charged up. But the horror was yet to unfold in front of her. She received a notification from her Uber app. Until now, she closed the app after getting into the car. The notification read, "You have been charged for the canceled booking." Riley opened the app and realized she is stepping into grave danger. Car number 2009 waited for her at the pickup location for almost 15 minutes. But as she didn't show up there, the driver just canceled the ride and left. If her ride has been canceled, then who is this person driving her right now? Riley's stomach dropped in fear. She couldn't speak or say a single word. There is no point of screaming right now because there wasn't a single human being nearby. She can't call someone in front of this guy asking for help. Riley knew this man took her into his car with bad intentions. Is he the slit-throat killer everyone was talking about at the party? Oh my God. Drops of sweat appeared on her forehead. Riley calmed herself down. The only way she can get out of this situation alive is if she uses her brain. The man looked at her from the rearview mirror and asked, "Are you all right, madam?" Riley smiled and said, "Yeah, I'm fine. How long will it take?" The man replied in a cold voice, "Not much longer." The man's reply felt like something is about to happen at any moment now. Riley was praying to God to save her from this unknown guy and his evil intentions. Riley said to the driver, keeping her voice as calm as possible, What were you talking about back then?" The driver said, "Oh, you mean the slit-throat killer? Interesting guy, huh?" Then the man chuckled. Riley said, "Interesting. The cops are going to catch that killer soon. They have already found his victims' bodies." The driver laughed this time and replied, "Madam, the cops found his victims because he wanted them to. People like this are insane. You can't spot them out even if they come right in front of you. They wear masks to fool you." The more the driver spoke about this serial killer, Riley's heart started to beat faster. But suddenly, the car started to jerk hugely and the driver pulled the brake. The car stopped, making a loud noise. The driver got out of the car and lifted the hood to check the engine. Riley sat inside quietly. The driver then came close to her window and said, "I think there has been some issue in the engine. Wait inside as I check it out." Riley knew the end was near. The man has probably stopped the car on his own and is now making this all up. It's high time, and Riley needs to act. The man again went in front of the car. Riley could hear the metal sound coming from behind the car bonnet. She slowly opened the car door, grabbing her bag in her hand, then tiptoed to the back of the car. There were vast empty fields on one side and deep woods on the other side of the road. The driver said, "Looks like we have to think of some other option, madam. I don't think this car will start tonight. If you don't mind, my house is nearby. We can go there and call the mechanics." So this is why this guy took this road, Riley thought to herself. This guy wants to lure her into the woods now and murder her like his 3 other victims. Riley didn't respond. She stood at the back of the car as silently as possible. Riley knew this is her only chance. She started to hear footsteps approaching her. With every step coming close to her, Riley slid to the opposite direction. By the time the driver reached behind the car, Riley went to his side. The driver got shocked as he realized Riley was missing. He said in a confused voice, "Madam, madam." Just then, he heard Riley's voice behind him. "Yes? What is it?" Riley said in a firm voice. Her eyes were wide and big. The driver got spooked for a moment. He then said, "We can walk to my house and call for a mechanic." Riley smirked and replied, "You are not my ride, no? I booked a cab number 2009. Your cab is 2006. The cab driver smiled awkwardly and said, "Well, you asked for a lift and I could use some extra cash, so I thought I'd drive you, but I took a wrong shortcut. Please don't call the cops on me, madam." Riley looked at him and said, "For a moment, I thought you were the slit-throat killer." The man laughed awkwardly and said, "No, madam, I am definitely not that creepy guy. Please believe me." Riley laughed and said, "You are wrong again. It's not a he, but a she." The driver spoke in a terrified face. "What?" Riley took out her shining knife and lifted her hand. Her innocent face turned into a devil. She smiled in a horrible way and sliced the driver's throat with one slash. The man fell lifeless on the floor while choking on his own blood. She then washed her hands with a water bottle inside her bag. She always carries water with her. It is better to wash off the blood immediately before it dries out on her skin. She pushed the body in the ditch nearby the dusty road with a kick. The high road is 5 minutes walk from there. She reached the highway and booked herself an Uber this time. It was 12 o'clock at night. Riley got inside the car and said to the driver, "Drive me home. I feel tired." Next day, the news flashed. New body found near an old dusty road at the town outskirt. Cops are saying this is the 4th victim of the slit-throat killer. The victim was an Uber driver, probably coming home that night as he had no bookings in the record. It seems like the killer stopped his car and lured him into his trap like every other victim. The senior commissioner of police has said they are going to catch this man very soon and put him behind bars for the rest of his life. Riley sipped from her coffee cup and gave an evil smile as she watched the news, sitting on her living room couch. This happened last month. I am a 26-year-old male living in Atlanta. I took a side job as an Uber driver. I worked morning shift in a garage so that I can drive Uber at night. I preferred the Uber night shift because of less traffic. Anyways, one night I was finishing up a trip nearby the city mall around 8:30. It was a long summer night. I decided to take one more trip and go home to enjoy my weekend in peace. I waited near the mall to get another trip request, but I kept waiting for 10 or 15 minutes and nothing happened. Being disappointed, I thought to call it a day and return home. I lived in a small cabin at the outskirts. I took the highway and started to drive home. I put on some music and opened the car window. A cool breeze came in and gave me some relief. I lit a cigarette and kept driving in a light mood. I couldn't wait to return home and sleep till noon the next day. Everything was going fine until I reached near the highway tunnel. IMR Highway has a huge tunnel that connects the city with the outskirt area. I was almost near the tunnel. Due to the roads being completely empty, I was driving a bit faster. I was almost 10 to 15 hands distance from entering the tunnel when a man sprinted right in front of my car from the bushes. I pushed the brake so hard that the car stopped, making the tires screech loudly. I got extremely scared, thinking I might have hurt that guy. My eyes kept searching for that man, but he was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, a hand grasped my shoulder from the window. At first, I was scared like hell, but then I got my shit together and looked out the window. I saw a man in his late 30s panting and gasping for air. He said in a broken voice, "Please, help me, please." I realized he is in danger or something similar. I asked him, "What is it? Why are you freaking out like this?" The man looked here and there as if someone is out there looking for him. He then said in a whispering voice, "They are searching for me. Please, you must help me." I got out of the car and looked around. Being honest, there wasn't a single creature nearby. The wide, empty highway was filled with the sounds of crickets chirping. I stared at the tunnel to check if someone was there. The long, hollow tunnel had nothing but yellow lights in it. I asked the man, "Who are you searching for?" The man said in a terrifyingly low voice, "The shadow people. They want me dead." I was out of my mind at that time. I didn't know what the hell this guy was talking about. I said, "Is this some kind of a sick joke? 'Cause I'm really not in the mood right now." The man got inside the car. He sat in the driver's seat and said, "Just drive. We must leave this place right now. They're coming." I got into the car cluelessly. I told the man, "Let me call 911 for you. See, my house is on the other side of the tunnel. You can wait in my car until they arrive." The man then took out a knife from his pocket and held it near my throat. He screamed at me and said, "Just fucking drive. I'm not gonna die at the hand of those shadow people." I didn't know what to do then. I was stronger than the guy. I would have knocked him out immediately if the knife wasn't pointed at me. I said in a low but firm voice, "Listen, let's just relax. I will drive you wherever. You can just take the knife down." The man started screaming again. "Looks like you have no fear of death. if you don't drive right now. Before he could finish the sentence, he looked at the back of the car and became numb. He was staring like a statue. I asked, "What is wrong with you?" "There is no such thing called shadow people. Stop this insanity and let me call 911 for help." The man then said, "Oh my God, they are watching us now." I turned around to see what the hell he was talking about, looking at the backside of the car. I knew it was something made up by his crazy mind, but as I looked, my heart dropped into my stomach. Who are these people? Where did they come from? I swear, guys, there was a group of black shadows standing on the road. Nothing was visible except darkness on their entire body. The man said, "Now do you believe me? Drive, drive." I said in a panicked voice, "What the hell? Who are these people? Why do they look like that?" The man said, "They are all dead, and now they want my soul." The group started to walk towards our car. I can't explain the horror, because even if there were 10 to 12 people, not a single step taken by their foot made a sound. It felt like they were all kind of floating on the air instead of walking. I tried to start the car engine, but suddenly it didn't start. I tried again and again, but nothing happened. I was completely shocked by how the car suddenly got stuck like this. The man said in a panicked voice, "They're coming now. Please, do something." I twisted the car key one last time, and finally, the car started. I pressed the accelerator, and the car picked up speed. We drove into the tunnel at full speed. I looked in the rearview mirror, and there was no one behind us. I made up my mind to reach home and call 911 to hand over this freak. I was almost close to getting out of the tunnel, just when a group of black shadows appeared from the air and blocked the exit. I hit the brakes and stopped in front of the group. But this time, I didn't turn off the engine. It was hard for me to believe what I was seeing. There were no faces, no color, only black figures standing at some distance from the car. The man then screamed and said, "Why don't you leave me alone?" and started to sob like a child. What happened next still gives me chills to this day. The group suddenly opened up all their eyes at the same time. Now, there were black shadows with huge, wide eyes. Their eyes were blood red and their pupils were pale white. I have never seen such horrifying eyes in my entire life. They all looked at the man beside me and made terrifying growls. For a second, it felt like we were being hunted by a pack of wolves. I broke free from my numbness and pressed the accelerator once again. The car drove into the black shadow group and we passed through them as air blew upon us. As we made it out of the tunnel, I finally saw red and blue lights coming from the other side. I saw 3 or 4 cop cars. I didn't call for 911 yet, but I was out of all senses of rational thinking. I was, in one word, exhausted. The man in the car was still sobbing and muttering, "Please let me go. Leave me alone." I know what I faced that night might seem like a made-up story to some, but if you believe me, then I do have a rational explanation behind that vicious night. The cops came and arrested the man. They told me he is convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment for mass murder in a cathedral. He broke out of prison a few hours back, but it's still really shocking to his state of mind. The cops took him back. I later read about that man. His name was Peter Shipman. One Sunday morning, he entered a church with 2 of his followers. After the prayer ceremony, his followers locked the church door from the inside. They shot 7 men and 5 women who came to attend the prayer. They robbed them and escaped the area. I can't even imagine how vicious that scenario would be when he shot all those people and left their bodies drenched in blood. But somehow, one of his followers drove their car into a tree while escaping. He died as his head bashed against the dashboard of the car. The man and his other follower ran away. Cops arrested the man under a dirty bridge. He was muttering, "Shadow people killing my partners." The body of the second follower was seen floating on the river near the bridge. Investigating officers claimed that the man killed the other partner to acquire the entire share. But if you ask me, I think it was those people's haunting spirits who took revenge on these 3 men. I have started day shifts in Uber now. I have decided to stay home at night for a couple of months to get over this unnatural incident. I don't know when I'll be able to go out at night again without the fear of shadow people.
This happened last year on Valentine's Day. I'm a 35-year-old male. I was working in an IT company where I met a girl. She joined the office as a fresher and started working under me as a trainee. Her name was Melissa. Everyone used to call her Molly. I've been an introvert since childhood. Due to my reserved nature, I hardly approach girls, even if I like someone. But Molly was completely opposite of me. She was outgoing and extremely extrovert. Anyways, due to her training, we used to spend most of the time together in the office. She was a bit younger than me. I kinda liked her carefree nature because it made me feel happy with her. One day, gathering all my courage, I asked her on a date with me. I was expecting a refusal or sudden news that she already had a boyfriend, but instead, she accepted. She told me that she always had her eye out for me, but due to my reserved nature, feared to approach me. We started going out and eventually, I shared many things with her about my life. People in the office started to pull my legs whenever Molly and I were spotted together by them. We ignored them because we were having a nice time with each other. One day we went to the pub for a couple of drinks after office. Molly got really drunk, and she stayed at my place that day. The next day was Sunday, so I woke up late. I was going to take a shower when I heard sounds in the kitchen. At first, I thought someone broke in. So I tiptoed into the kitchen and saw Molly cooking breakfast. She smiled at me and said, "I'm making French toast. I hope you like it." I got a bit surprised because I wasn't expecting her to stay till morning. After that day, things took a different turn in our relationship. Molly started to stay back at my place every now and then. I won't deny that I really liked her, but sometimes I used to feel out of space in my life. One evening, I came back home from the office. Molly took the day off that day. As I went to unlock my door, I found it already open. After entering, I saw Molly was watching TV laying at my couch. She smiled like usual and asked me how my day went. I was really awestruck this time. I asked her, "How did you get my keys?" To which she replied, "I made a copy for myself. I hope it's okay." I wanted to tell her it's not, but I chose not to. I should have told her that day, I know. Anyways, she stayed the night like every other day. I was going through an important file in office when one of my colleagues came to my room and said, "Congratulations, Robert. You owe us a party." Like a completely clueless person, I stood there with a blank face. I came out of my office and noticed a small crowd of office people standing near Molly's desk surrounding her. She was smiling and blushing like a teenage girl. I thought it would be rude to ask her in front of everyone, so I confronted her when she was alone in the cafeteria. I said, "Molly, what the hell is going on?" She smiled and said, "Nothing. I just told everyone that we were a couple and are soon to be engaged." I know it was rude of me, but I laughed because I couldn't believe my ears. I said, "What? I never said anything like that to you. I mean, no offense, but I think I need more time before coming to a decision like that." I expected Molly to react in an angry way, but I never expected she would cross our limits that day. I was, after all, her senior, but she suddenly turned all pissed off and started to scream at me, saying, "Oh, really? You didn't take time to think that before jumping into bed with me?" Now, I already said I'm an introverted person, so the way Molly started a scene creating people gathered near the cafeteria, I was highly embarrassed and humiliated. I had to take a stand for myself too, because when a woman makes a comment like that about a man in a public place, the general outcome is people identify as the man at fault without even listening to his side. I looked at her with angry eyes and replied, "Molly, I never forced you onto anything. You only stole my house keys and made a copy of it. You only started to stay back at my apartment even though I never asked you to. I like you and wanted to spend more time with you so that we could know each other well, but I think I have known you enough now. Let's just cut off from whatever's going through your mind. I would prefer my freedom and peace more than anything in this world. Sorry, but I can't go on with this." I stormed out of the office that day. I changed my house locks the next day because I didn't want any more troubles. A week had passed and Molly avoided me, and I felt relieved that we had moved past the bitterness and could be on our own now. Our office held a party to celebrate Valentine's Day. Molly asked a guy named Sean from the tech department as her date to the party. Whether she was trying to make me jealous or maybe actually moved on, I didn't know. I asked one of my colleagues also as my date for the party. The party was happening at the office rooftop. The decorations of the party was perfectly themed on Valentine's Day. Big red hearts, balloons all over the place. There was even a small fountain pouring champagne in the right side. Everyone was dressed at their best. I saw Molly getting really drunk and dancing with her date. I sat down with some of my colleagues and started to drink too. Things were going well. Then, we heard a terrible scream. I sprung up from my chair and everyone started to panic. I recognized the scream. It was Molly's voice. It took time to figure out that she was not in the party. We all started looking for her and found out she was screaming from the ladies' washroom. We all rushed towards her. As we reached the washroom, we saw a vicious sight. Sean was lying on the hallway right near the doorstep of the washroom. His head was bleeding heavily. At first, we all thought he was dead, but then one of our colleagues checked him and said, "Call an ambulance, we can still save him." Molly was sitting on the corner of the floor and sobbing like a little girl. Sean got admitted to the hospital immediately. Everyone asked Molly about what happened. She looked at me and started crying even louder. I went close to her and hugged her. Then I asked what happened. She said Sean tried to take advantage of her and started forcing her. Out of fear, she hit him in the head with her beer bottle. Everyone at the office felt bad for her, and I took her to my place that night. I thought she is already in enough trauma, so I can show her some compassion that night. After that day, Molly again started to get close to me. I won't deny that out of sympathy, I kinda grew a soft corner for her too. Sean was still in the hospital, and the office decided to file a harassment case against him. I don't know why, something just didn't seem right. Molly was happy and jolly again in no time. One day I was walking through the same hallway where we found Sean. I noticed a security camera there, and an idea came to my mind. I immediately rushed to the security room and asked for footage of the Valentine's Day party. As I checked the footage, my suspicion became true. I saw Molly walking with Sean in the corridor, and suddenly she lifted her beer bottle and struck him on the head. You can now guess what happened after that. I submitted those tapes to the official authority. Not only they gave Sean a clean chit, but also fired Molly. Sean even filed a complaint against her to the cops, but Molly has suddenly disappeared. Last night, I received a text from an unknown number that reads, "All I did for you, Robert, you broke my heart. I will come back to get my revenge. Till then, much love, darling." I know it's definitely from Molly. I called the cops and informed them about the text in the morning. I don't know if I'll ever see her again, but Molly, if you're watching this, stay the hell away from me. You are a disgusting person, and don't you dare threaten me this time.
Hi, my name is Cindy. I recently got out of therapy. Something happened a few months back that made my life miserable. I can't hardly sleep, eat, or do any normal thing. No matter where I go, a sense of fear always stood at the back of my neck. I stay in Canada. The locality where I live has a huge park at 5 to 7 minutes distance from my house. People often went there for morning workouts or calm evening walk. Similarly, when I felt stressed due to work or any other reason, I made a habit of going to that park for a walk. Due to its huge area, one could enjoy a peaceful time in the park easily. One evening, I was walking through the park. At some distance, I noticed a huge tree with long branches. The tree is not the only thing that caught my eyes. I also noticed someone lying on the ground right under a long branch of that tree. At first, it looked like a shiny metal thing, but when I got close, I saw it was a cell phone. I looked around me thinking someone might have dropped it while walking, but at that time, I was the only one in that particular area of the park. Like a good citizen, I picked up the phone and decided to submit it to the cops on my way home. The cell phone was like any other Android phone. It had a black body and no extra feature that can stand out for identification. I was walking towards the police station while checking the phone. I didn't want to pry on anyone's privacy, but for a better understanding of the owner, I swiped the lock and the phone opened. There was no picture on it. Even the contact list was empty. It startled me a bit that there's literally nothing in this phone that can lead to its owner. I was going to lock the screen and put it back in my bag just when I saw a few recorded videos stored in the TikTok app. I could tell that the owner recorded 3 videos to upload to TikTok, but somehow didn't. I was almost near the police station, but out of curiosity, I thought to go home and look at these videos first. I know it was that moment that made my life miserable. I got home and freshened up. I lied on my bed and played the first TikTok video from the cell phone. As the video began, an average-height guy appeared on the screen. He was seen walking around the park. He didn't say anything, just kept walking. After walking for a few more seconds, he reached near the tree where I found the phone. He looked up at the branch, and the video ended there. My curiosity grew more and I moved on to the next video. In the next video, the camera stood still featuring a messy bedroom. Then, the same man entered the room with a wide rope in his hand. I was completely clueless about what was happening in these videos, but I kept watching anyway. Now, I felt I could have stopped. At the end of the second video, the man looked at the camera and said, "Whoever is watching this, I will find you." And the video ended. Things started to feel very creepy now. I could tell that that man was on drugs or something because his behavior didn't appear normal to me. I lied on my bed blankly. I thought for a few seconds, should I play the last video or not? But then, I did. The last video started on the park again. It was dark all around and the video was recorded in night mode. The cell phone was kept on something, maybe a rock or a piece of wood lying on the ground. It captured the tree branch and the starry sky above it. There was no sign of the man when suddenly a rope was thrown on the tree branch. I realized that the guy was tying the wide rope on the branch. At first, it took me a few seconds to understand what he was up to, but when I did, my stomach dropped. He tied the rope into a noose. Then he looked at the camera again and smiled in a very bizarre way. I could hear him climbing on the tree after that. My heart started to race like a horse. I thought to myself, is he really going to commit suicide? But before I could hold that thought, a loud sound of a neck snapping took place, and I saw the man's foot dangling in the air. I screamed and threw the phone away. I sat on the bed for at least 5 to 10 minutes thinking about what just happened. What did I just witness? After some time, I got my shit together and picked up the cell phone. My hands were still shaking. I kept the phone inside my bag and decided to go to the cops first thing in the morning. I got highly disturbed after watching these videos. Somehow, I went to the kitchen and started making dinner. I was making fries when suddenly I felt someone was standing behind me and watching me. I immediately turned around, but there was no one. The corridor leading to my kitchen was dark and empty. I already locked my doors and windows after getting home, so I was pretty sure that it's the video that is creeping me out. I finished my dinner and went straight to bed. I had enough for that day, so all I wanted was to sleep and get rid of that cell phone the next morning. I don't know how long I slept, but suddenly I felt a touch of wind on my face. I slowly opened my sleepy eyes and saw a dark face with two wide, bright eyes leaning on me. The face was literally breathing on me, and I could feel the warm breath. I got stuck at that moment. Didn't know what to do or what was actually happening. I have never seen such wide eyes in my entire life. I thought at that moment that I would die right now, but suddenly my phone rang and I turned on my left side. There was an alarm going off, and I noticed it's 4 a.m. already. I turned back in a rush and realized there was no one around me. I looked all over the apartment, but there was no sign of any person. I heaved a sigh of relief because it was just a bad dream. I blamed myself for bringing that cell phone home and watching those bizarre videos. I couldn't sleep anymore. I waited till morning. I kept drinking black coffee just to keep me awake. There was no way I was falling asleep while that cell phone is still in my house. Around 10 a.m., I got ready and went to the police station. 2 cops were sitting inside. Seeing me at such early hours surprised them a little. One cop said, "Yes, ma'am, how can we help you?" I handed him the cell phone and said, "Please take it. I found it in the park and I know I shouldn't have, but I did go through it and it has made my life a living hell. I mean," I was fumbling and panting in fear. The other cop gave me a glass of water and said, "Ma'am, please sit down. Take a deep breath and tell us what happened." I did what he said and calmed myself down. Then I explained the entire scenario of how a man has recorded his suicide in the form of TikTok videos on this cell phone. I told them that I found this phone under the same tree where he committed suicide. The cops exchanged surprised looks among each other, and then one of them took the phone and started to check it. The other cop went through the computer on his desk and said, "But ma'am, there are no reports of suicide happening in that park so far." I was surprised to hear it, but didn't say anything. I was feeling utterly disturbed by all that happened. The cops kept asking me more questions about when I found that phone, etc., while the other one kept searching the phone. After a while, I got up and said, I just want to go home now. I had enough. Can't take this anymore. The cop who was asking me questions replied, yes, I can understand the impact of such a weird incident. Don't worry, you'll be fine. I was ready to leave, just when the other cop who was checking the phone all this time got up and said, stop. I got shocked and said, what happened? The cop had a worried face. He asked in a hesitant voice, ma'am, you said when you found this phone, it had only 3 pre-recorded TikTok videos and nothing else, right? I replied with a confused face. Yes, like I said, the guy who recorded those videos maybe to upload later on TikTok, but why do you ask? The cop didn't answer my question and showed the phone to the other cop. Both of their faces got filled with worries, and I said, can you please tell me what's going on? The cop replied, ma'am, I think we should come with you and check on your house. I was completely shocked by hearing this. Why do they need to check my house? But before I could say something, they asked me, do you live alone? I replied, yes, I do, but officer, why are you asking me such weird questions? What does me staying alone have anything to do with this cell phone? The cop then showed the phone to me. Along with the videos, there was also a photograph on that phone. The photo was taken last night at my own house. In that photo, I was sleeping like a dead cat. I stay alone. I was all by myself in the house last night. Then who the hell took my picture? I have changed my house, even though the cops searched it back then. I attended therapy because something deep down in my heart keeps telling me that dark face with wide eyes wasn't just a dream I had that night. I'm not a judgmental person, but this one encounter has scarred me for life. I am Selena. I work in a restaurant. I share an apartment with a colleague of mine. Her name is Tina. Tina and I both met at work. Fortunately, we were both looking for a place and it was helpful to split the rent. Working at a restaurant can be hectic sometimes. After long, tiresome days, none of us had the energy to cook dinner or even go out for it. So we used to order food whenever we felt this way. One night, after coming from work, Tina and I decided to order pizza. There was a local pizza shop at 15 to 20 minutes distance from our house. The shop has opened recently, so Tina and I both decided to try pizza from there. I called the shop and placed our order. We started to prepare for a movie night. After half an hour, our doorbell rang. I rushed to the door because I was feeling really hungry. As I opened the door, I saw a pizza delivery guy standing outside. He was wearing the delivery costume. The cap on his head was covering half of his face. He said in a cold voice, "Your pizza, ma'am." Tina came and started to pay the guy. I don't know why this guy's behavior felt very off to me. As I went to take the pizza boxes from him, he weirdly touched my hand and brushed off his fingers on my wrist. It happened so quickly and unexpectedly that I couldn't react at that moment. The man looked at me and smirked in a very creepy way. We closed the door and he left. I didn't speak about it to Tina. We watched a horror movie and ate pizza. Around 12 of that night, we went to sleep. The living room and kitchen area are in the middle of the apartment. Our bedrooms stood facing each other. From my bedroom window, the entire view of the backyard was clearly visible. There was a big tree close to my window. I liked the moonlight in the room, so I often slept without closing the curtains. I was really tired that night, and the next day was a Sunday, so I planned to sleep till late morning. I don't clearly remember how long I slept, but suddenly, a sound woke me up. The sound was like leaves rubbing against each other. I slowly opened my eyes and looked around my room. The moonlight made my room clearly visible even in the dark. I didn't see anyone in the room. I thought it might be birds or wind creating this rusty sound. So I closed my eyes and tried to sleep again. But this time, I heard the sound one more time. The sound was a bit louder this time. I got up on the bed and my eyes accidentally went to the tree outside. I don't know how to explain this, but at that moment, I realized what people mean by fear in real life. There was a dark shadow sitting on the branch of the tree. I was sure it was a man, but due to the bushy leaves, I could only see his two wide eyes. I have never seen such a scary, blood-freezing stare. Our eyes met, and I couldn't move anymore. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I felt like the cat got my tongue. Drops of sweat started to appear on my forehead. The eyes kept looking at me without even blinking for a second. Frozen in fear, I kept sitting on my bed like a statue. Suddenly, I heard an owl hooting from that tree and broke free from that state of trance. I screamed in a loud voice, and within a second, Tina came rushing to my room. She opened the door of my room and turned on the light. I was breathing heavily. I heard a sound of a loud thud, like someone jumped from the tree. Being confused with my behavior, Tina asked in a panicked voice, "What is it, Selena? Why did you scream?" I said in a sobbing tone, "Someone was sitting in the tree and watching me sleep." I started to cry. Tina took out the flashlight and opened the window. She then searched the entire tree, but there was no one. She said in a comforting voice, "I think you just had a bad dream, Selena. Look, there's no one there." I said in the same sobbing tone, "No, you don't understand. I saw his eyes. His vicious, creepy eyes were staring at me all the time." Tina comforted me for a while and put me back to sleep. She closed the window and pulled the curtains. I somehow went back to sleep. Tina got back to her room. I felt like she didn't believe me and thought I actually dreamed all of this. But I was really sure that someone was sitting in the tree and watching me sleep. The next morning, when I woke up and went to the living room, I saw Tina shouting at someone over the phone. It took me some time to realize what she was saying. As I listened to her attentively, the hair at the back of my neck stood up in terror. Tina was telling someone, "How can you be so irresponsible? You should have called us once last night. I'm calling the cops. This is utterly terrifying for us." She then disconnected the phone and sat beside me with a terrifying face. I asked her, "What happened, Tina?" She replied in a freaked out voice, "I went to the backyard to check after you said someone broke in last night. I found this cap under the tree." She showed me the cap she picked up from the backyard. It was that same cap the creepy pizza guy wore last night. My face turned pale as I realized he watched me for God knows how long, sitting in that tree. I said, "What the fuck? We should inform the cops about this guy and also call the pizza shop. They can give us details on this guy." Tina pressed my hand and said, "I don't want to scare you, Selena, but I just got some very bizarre news from them. I called the pizza shop to complain about their employee, but what they told me has scared me too." My eyes got stuck in fear. I said in a shaken voice, "Why? What did they say?" Tina replied, "The pizza shop told me that they sent the delivery guy to deliver the pizza at our address, but the guy never reached our place or the shop. Someone knocked him out midway and stole his jacket and cap. The shop thought the guy must have delivered us and left for home, but when he didn't show up in the morning, they called the cops. The cops have found the poor guy lying unconscious in a dingy alley nearby. No one has the minimum idea who was the guy that delivered our pizza last night." I couldn't believe my ears. Tina and I immediately rushed to the police station. We saw the actual delivery guy with a bandage over his head. He was sitting there and telling the cops about what happened to him. I also told the cops how the creepy imposter behaved with me last night. I even told them how he kept watching me in the middle of the night from the tree. The cops are still looking for this man. We have described his face to the cops for identification. I don't know what his problem was, but creepy, fucked up dude who injured an innocent man and scared 2 women to death, may we never meet again. I am Miley from Australia. This happened when I was studying in high school. Our school used to arrange field trips for students of every batch. The field trips varied on the subject teacher who was in charge of it. For example, our history teacher often took us to archaeological sites or museums. Almost every student took part because field trips carried good grades and it was more exciting than any boring lecture. My friend Corey and I decided to attend an upcoming field trip. Our teacher, Miss Williams, gave us a form and told us to bring it back with our parents' signature on it by tomorrow. The destination of the field trip was Lake Mungo. For those who aren't aware of this venue, let me give you a brief idea of this place. Lake Mungo is a dry lake located in New South Wales, Australia. The lake is the central feature of Mungo National Park and is one of 17 lakes in the World Heritage. Many important archaeological finds have been made at the lake, most significantly, the discovery of remains of Mungo Man and Mungo Woman. the oldest human remains in the world to be ritually cremated. The night before the field trip, Corey stayed with me. After dinner, we went to my room and started to finish packing. Corey suddenly said, "Do you know, there are rumors of that place carrying bad omens." I looked at her with surprised eyes and said, "Stop talking like a freak." She laughed and said, "No, it's true. I read about the place. This is probably the most ancient burial ground in the world so far." I said, "Yeah, I heard that too. Why is Miss Williams even taking us to dead people's land? I mean, there are so many other places to see." Corey mocked me and said, "Why? You scared, butterfly?" And started to laugh. I rolled my eyes and didn't reply to her nonsense. My mom came upstairs and said, "Have fun on your field trip, girls. Now, get some sleep. You will have to wake up early tomorrow." We chatted for a few more minutes and then fell asleep. The next morning, we got onto the school bus and our journey began. The vast empty fields surrounded by small brown hills was quite a sight to watch. I slowly rolled down my window and cool air refreshed my mind. Other students were making jokes and pulling each other's legs. But suddenly, Corey again brought up the topic of how Mungo Lake is haunted by ancient demons, and everyone got busy talking about that. I, on the other hand, was feeling really irritated with this baseless discussion, so I plugged in my earphones and started to enjoy the ride. The sunlight wasn't too bright that day. A partially clouded sky made the weather ideal for a thunderstorm. I heard Miss Williams tell our bus driver, "We need to hurry. I don't want them to stay over after dark." We reached our destination around 3 p.m. Even though it was afternoon, the dark clouds surrounded the entire sky and the sun disappeared into them. Miss Williams started to tell us about the historical records of this place. Everyone took notes on their own for their project. Groups of people went on exploring the place on their own. It was a deserted land. No one would believe that this place used to be a lake at some time. Corey and I ventured on our own. I was looking around trying to find something unique when an area caught my eyes. The place was filled with huge rocks scattered here and there. I saw a rock about 10 to 15 hands distance from me. The reason why it caught my attention was the graffiti made on it. I told Corey, "I'll be back in some time." She went to another group of girls saying, "Okay, don't go too far." I then walked towards the rock. As soon as I reached near it, I saw tribal human figures were drawn on it. The drawings no doubt felt ancient. After looking at them carefully, I realized these aren't some random drawings. There was a story in them. A group of people seemed to worship a stone-like figure. The figure had no shape except it was red in color. Then, the stone started to reflect light in the next sequence of the drawings. At the last one, the people lied on the ground dead while a black wind seemed to go into the stone. Obviously, I didn't understand what it was, but I knew they were performing some kind of ritual. I was thinking to ask Miss Williams about it when suddenly a flash of lightning struck in the distance. Raindrops started to fall from the sky, and everyone decided to head back. I ran towards the bus, and we started for home. After coming back home, I made a sketch of that drawing from my imagination so that I can show it to our history teacher the next day. Next day when I reached school, I saw Corey standing in the hallway while 3 girls gathered around her. She was showing something to them with her bright eyes. I walked towards the group and noticed Corey holding something in her palm. I asked in a curious voice, "What's going on here?" Corey said, "Look what I found yesterday," and showed her palm to me. As soon as I witnessed the thing in her hand, the hair at the back of my neck stood up. It was a small red stone, exactly like the one in the drawings from the lake. I said, "You shouldn't have taken this from the site, Corey." Corey said, "Relax, this is just a rock. I'm going to make a chain and wear it. I just thought it's pretty, so I took it. No one's going to send me to prison for stealing a useless rock, Miley." I know it might seem I was overreacting, but something in my heart kept telling me it wasn't just a rock. I didn't say anything more to her because I knew she is not going to believe me anyway. During recess, I went to Miss Williams. She was sitting in the classroom, working on her own. I said in a low voice, "Miss Williams, can I come in?" She looked at me over her glasses and said, "Why aren't you at the cafeteria eating lunch?" I smiled awkwardly and said, Yeah, I just ate. I actually have something to ask you." She said, "Sit down. What is it?" I showed her my copy and explained everything. She took a good look at my drawings and appreciated me for having an eidetic memory. She then said in a serious voice, "According to my understanding, I think this is a worship ritual. But this is not just any ritual. It's probably a cult ritual. I looked at her with a confusing face and said, what does that mean? Miss William pointed to the drawings and said, "Here, you see this rock? This is not just any rock. This is a symbol of Mungo's people's Dark Lord. Because in the next picture, they are offering their souls to the Dark Lord, which is why this rock starts to enlighten. And on the last picture, it acquires their souls, which are these black wind-like figures, leaving them dead." My head now started to throb in fear. I said in a calm but shaken voice, "So, what will happen if a common man takes this stone with him?" She smiled and said, "Well, I can't say how far all of this is true, but any object involved with ancient ritual is said to be cursed. Using that object from a layman's perspective or moving it away from its site are said to cause huge trouble. But why are you asking me this?" I changed the topic saying, "Nothing, it's just something came to mind." That day, while going home after school, I told Corey, "Listen, you must get rid of this stone, Corey. I mean, you were only saying the other day how haunted that place is. Don't you think taking something from that place can result in a bad omen? Let's just throw away this stone before it harms you in some way." But suddenly, Corey's face changed. Her eyes went big and anger took over. She said in a spine-chilling voice, "This stone is mine now. Am I clear, Miley?" "But you are not understanding, Corey. This stone is cursed. I saw the graffiti." Before I could finish, Corey pushed me onto the ground while making a devilish grunt. I couldn't believe this was the same Corey I knew. I could see clearly what the stone was doing to her. I watched her walk away. After coming back home, I tried many times to call and text her, but she didn't respond. The next morning, my mom woke me up in her panicked voice. Miley, wake up!" I woke up and saw my mom crying. I asked her, "What's wrong, Mom? What happened?" She replied in a sobbing voice, "Your friend Corey is no more, Miley. She committed suicide last night. Her mom just called. She was crying like hell." We all rushed to Corey's house and saw paramedics taking her body out on a stretcher. Her body was covered, but I saw her hand dangling from it. Her lifeless, pale hand kept hanging. I noticed her hand closed into a tight fist, but when they pushed her body inside the ambulance, a thing fell on the road from her closed fist. It was the red stone. Corey's mother told us she found Corey lying on the floor. She slashed her own throat with her kitchen knife. They have no idea why she did that. After coming home from school, Corey went to her room and never came out. She even skipped her dinner that night. They have no idea why she went to the kitchen and took the knife. This all might seem like a coincidence, but I knew it was the cursed stone that took her soul. I picked up the stone from the ground and took it back to Mungo Lake the next day. I couldn't find the site with the graffiti this time, but I threw the red stone into the sand and came back. I feel extremely sad that I couldn't save my friend from getting involved in an ancient curse. This happened during my holiday at my grandmother's house. After my mom died, my grandma raised me. I eventually moved out and started a life of my own, but I still remained in touch with her. I was pretty excited to visit her after a really long time. I took my friends Marco and Tim with me. On our way, Marco said, "So, how is the area where your grandma stays?" I replied, "Well, she lives down the countryside. There's a dense forest near that area. It is quite famous amongst the local people." Tim asked in a curious tone, "What is so special about that forest?" I smirked and replied, "Well, there's a waterfall inside that forest." Marco said, "That's nothing special. There are numerous waterfalls in this world." I laughed and said, "That's quite true, but this waterfall is unique on its own. There's many stories regarding it. Grandma will tell you when we get there." We got onto the refreshing country road. The cool air calmed us, and we drove our stress away. After 3 hours of drive, when we reached Grandma's house, we saw the sun was setting behind the trees. As I honked the horn, Grandma opened the door and came to greet us. I was excited and happy to see her for a long time. I hugged her and said, "Oh, Granny, I missed you so much." She caressed my hair and said, "I missed you too, my dear. Come on, let's get inside. You boys must be hungry." The house was still the same way I left it. I sat on the couch. My friend sat next to me. Granny gave us lemonade. The amazing smell of delicious food was roaming all over the house. I took my friends to my room. They all brought their own sleeping bags. After settling with their luggage, we all freshened up and came downstairs. The dining table was filled with tasty dishes. Granny cooked my favorite roasted chicken. There was mashed potatoes, fried vegetables, and soup. After such a long drive, we were hungry like hell. Without wasting a single second, we all jumped on the food. After a delicious dinner, we all sat in the living room. Granny sat down on her rocking chair and started knitting a muffler. Marco said in a hesitated voice, Granny, Richard was telling us about a waterfall inside the forest nearby, but he said there are stories regarding it. Granny laughed and said, Oh, Richard already mentioned the waterfall. I said, Tell them the stories you used to tell me as bedtime stories. Granny said in a low voice, Well, there are many events that happen there. Local people have named it the Suicide Waterfall. Tim said in a surprised voice, Suicide Waterfall? That's a very unusual name. What happened there? Granny said, Many years back, there was a beautiful girl named Layla. She fell in love with a traveler. The boy came here from the city. They spent time together, but one day, the boy returned to his house, and Layla got heartbroken.
Messages to tell her, hey, come by another day, but he didn't.